Philanthropic Alliance is a hub of philanthropy connections in the Caribbean. We're harnessing financial and other resources to accelerate the achievement of SDGs in the Caribbean by 2030. And we're connecting philanthropy communities to build a learning community that can foster an enabling environment to enable us to achieve the SDGs in our region. Our women-led philanthropy initiative moves us closer to achieving these objectives. While the Caribbean accounts for a very tiny part of greenhouse gas emissions globally, it is disproportionately more vulnerable to climate risks with massive economic and human costs. And we're very mindful of that. And so for us in the Caribbean, building a capacity to respond to climate change is a matter of survival, especially for women who are on the front lines. Women are disproportionately impacted by climate change because of existing inequalities and discrimination. UN Women recently reported that after climate disaster, women and girls are more likely to be left out and left behind in times of crisis. Caribbean women especially are accustomed to being resilient, community-driven, and goal-oriented. And we need to streamline resources to do what we do best, from the community to the boardroom and to the leadership of our countries.
Oh, so I'm on now. Start the video, start my video then. Welcome to Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance in Action Week, building a strong foundation for Caribbean philanthropy. Thank you for joining us today as we explore the critical role of philanthropy in the Caribbean. Building a strong foundation for Caribbean philanthropy is more than just pooling resources. It's about creating a system that empowers communities, amplifies regional voices, and fosters long-term solutions for the pressing challenges we face. A strong philanthropic foundation ensures that we're not just reacting to crisis, but actively shaping a more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable future. The Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance has been pivotal in laying the groundwork for a more intersectional and effective philanthropic landscape. By building connections and supporting local leadership, we have started to reshape the way Philanthropic Alliance operates in the region, focusing not only on immediate relief, but also on systemic change. This forum provides an opportunity for all of us to engage in a whole sector ecosystem approach to tackle the climate crisis and address intersectionality agendas. The challenges are immense, but so are the opportunities if we align and coordinate philanthropic efforts at the local level and the national and regional levels. Together, we can create a powerful force for change. As we look to the future, it is clear there's no time to wait. The urgency of the climate crisis requires immediate action. And this week, we will explore the challenges and strengths of climate philanthropy in the Caribbean. We invite you to be part of the movement to strengthen partnerships, foster collaboration, and connect with the global philanthropic climate movement. Tomorrow, we will share lessons learned from recent storms and explore innovative strategies for disaster preparedness. And by fostering collaboration among philanthropic organizations, government agencies, and community leaders, we aim to strengthen our collective ability to respond to natural disasters and build more sustainable disaster-resilient communities. In addition, throughout the week, we will spotlight diverse voices and honor funders who are driving real change within our network. Our funder spotlight will feature a visionary whose work blends arts and culture, showing how creativity can fuel solutions to societal challenges. We'll also highlight causes like gender equality, Indigenous rights, and intersectional philanthropy to fuel progress across multiple fronts. In our closing session, emerging leaders will share their experiences and insights on how they've used philanthropy to advance social and environmental causes. Their stories remind us that the future of philanthropy lies in innovation, collaboration, and community-driven solutions. We encourage you to stay with us throughout the Philanthropy Week as we engage in insightful discussions, sharing inspiring stories, and explore collaborative opportunities. This morning, I'll share the evolution, the vital work of Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance. Founded in 2019, CARAFIL, supported by over 12 foundations, has undergone a strategic evolution. We initially focused on understanding the regional philanthropic ecosystem, and our research revealed a fragmented landscape with limited collaboration and information sharing, lacking a regional convening entity to galvanize the philanthropic community. Our initial convenings in 2019 spotlighted that the Caribbeans experienced significant challenges in achieving 12 crucial SDGs, with nearly 6% of our countries lagging behind. The devastating impact of Hurricane Dorian in September 2019 in the Bahamas caused over $5.1 billion in damages and numerous fatalities, which further emphasized the urgent need for action. Within the same year, Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance became a recognized UN entity to facilitate coordinate initiatives and resources required to address complex global challenges facing the Caribbean. Today, in 2024, we continue to face heightened environmental threats and recognize the interconnectedness of social, economic, and ecological systems for achieving global goals. Philanthropy in the Caribbean is further along from when we started, but remains fragmented with limited data on funding flows. And the region receives a small fraction of the 2% of global philanthropy allocated to climate change. And additionally, there's a $2.5 trillion development investment gap in the region. Our current vision is to enable inclusive communities with equitable resources for people in the Caribbean to flourish and to achieve their full potential. Our new and refined mission is to transform global philanthropy to work as a community, building upon the unique assets within the Caribbean and facilitating equitable philanthropic investment for inclusive, sustainable development for all, supported by principles of partnerships, community collaboration, equity and inclusion, innovation, empowerment, and leadership development. So we're committed to a legacy of continuous learning and adaptation by actively engaging with local partners to address emerging challenges, redefining and developing a powerful narrative of philanthropy in the region, moving beyond traditional models to focus on collaboration, Caribbean strengths, and equitable investment, and also changing the language from potential to thriving to flourishing, where not only see the potential in the Caribbean people, but we envision an inclusive environment where everyone has the fair financial resources to thrive. And we're also committed to translating sustainable development goals into actionable philanthropy in the Caribbean by serving as a trusted navigator, guiding global philanthropists through the complexities of the Caribbean, while serving as a local partner with deep community connections and acting as a cultural translator. So our strategic planning this year has informed us that placing Caribbean communities at the core of development efforts is fundamental to achieving sustainable and equitable outcomes. Our assumption is that Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance, as a convener, as a facilitator, strategic leader, and thought partner with local expertise, knowledge, and networks, will play a pivotal role in catalyzing systemic change in the region and for international philanthropy. For 2024, CARPhil Alliance is poised to serve as a hub for philanthropy, powering sustainable development. We're actively implementing 4 core strategies to achieve our goals. Our core strategy 1 is to convene philanthropy to advance communities of practice, to enhance philanthropy practices, foster cross-sector collaboration, promote continuous learning, recognize excellence in philanthropy, and to drive measurable philanthropic impact across the region. Our core strategy 2 is to advocate for equitable funding and resource allocation by creating innovative funding platforms, pioneering new philanthropic approaches, and working with funders to shift away from traditional short-term project-based funding while committing to long-term systemic change. Our core strategy number 3 is to facilitate collaborative philanthropy and engagement, to facilitate regional and global philanthropy, to communicate, plan, and create community-centered solutions across the region, and to build relationships with NGOs through trust-based philanthropic practices and direct community engagement. Core strategy number 4 is to facilitate capacity building and accelerated actions towards global development goals by supporting NGOs across the Caribbean to enhance their capacity and contributions to achieving SDGs, and particularly in marginal communities within the region. So our strategies this year over the years, has yielded significant results. We have successfully mobilized the Caribbean Tree Planting Project, planting over 1.5 million trees regionally to combat climate change. We have developed an interactive funded database platform to track philanthropic flows, facilitating resource allocation and maximizing impact through the Caribbean. Through the Caribbean Philanthropic Funded Database Platform, we're making it easier for funders to navigate the funding landscape for funders, grant makers, and international donors. We have launched the Woman-Led Climate Philanthropy to facilitate an ecosystem of philanthropy and to leverage capacity building resources to empower women to enhance their climate resilience. And we have supported post-hurricane recovery and rebuilding efforts through our Trusted Partners Initiative. So we look forward to working with you as a regional membership network, supporting the philanthropic ecosystem within the Caribbean to mobilize resources, to empower stakeholders, to champion equity, to build knowledge, and to foster collaboration. And so I will now share the floor with our dynamic chair of our Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance, Rosalia Hamilton, who led the formation of the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance in 2019, and who is the current CEO of the Lascaux Chin Foundation. Dr. Hamilton is a social scientist and an advocate for sustainable development that improves the environment, economy, and society and governance, and has served in several roles as Vice President of University of Technology, led the MSME Alliance, a network of small business and organizations, established the Institute of Law and Economics, served as a special advisor and trade policy consultant in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as a chief advisor to the Prime Minister of Jamaica in 2006-2007, and is currently a distinguished scholar in the P.J. Patterson Institute, and as the Republic of Sierra Leone first honorary consul to Jamaica. And so I will invite Dr. Rosalia to join us and for her to share with you how to join and to be part of our growing Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance. Over to you, Rosalia. Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
so much, Anthea.
Welcome all. Good morning. I wanted to start by just thanking you, Anthea, for all the work that you do. I assume the video will come on shortly. Let me just jump in though, Anthea, all the way back in September 2019, when we started the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance with the very ambitious agenda of harnessing financial and other resources required to accelerate achievement of SDGs in the Caribbean over 10 years. It was an awesome beginning. We started in partnership with the Grace Kennedy Foundation under the awesome leadership of Caroline Mafu and 15 other foundations, mainly from Jamaica, but with Caribbean reach, including my own foundation, the Lascochin Foundation. And we joined, we were all here in New York. We launched this alliance in collaboration with the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDESA. What a journey it has been. Back then, none of us could have envisioned the COVID-19 nor the devastating impact of climate change across the region over the years. Wow, but we've made it. We've survived. And, it's just testament to the fact that we're truly resilient people. That's really who we are. So I want to thank all the individuals and the philanthropic organizations that have walked with us over the years. I should say ran with us over the years, because time just moves so fast. Especially want to thank our board of directors of the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance, and especially the current strategic partners and funders who continue to serve us in this evolution that we're part of. I want to highlight our long-standing partner, Trees That Feed Foundation, Mary McLaughlin, our breadfruit mother, the Institute of Law Economics, ABFE, St. Croix Foundation, Bridge Foundation, the Clinton Global Initiative, Tides Foundation. Thank you so much for your support. Open Society Foundation, and of course, my own Lascochin Foundation. Tremendous support to me over the years to enable me to lead this awesome alliance across the region. It's now 5 years, and we're here under the amazing leadership of our CEO, Anthea McLaughlin. You've just heard from her. She's worked tirelessly to make this all happen. She's also losing her voice, as you heard. I'm going to ask you to give her a round of applause or a snap. She's done a really good job. Over the years, the past year actually, we've been focusing on the structure of the Carphil Alliance, and we're creating a convening space for funders and stakeholders. So I'm going to just drop a link in the chat, right? Because when you go on that link, and I've just dropped it in the chat, you'll see our membership arrangement. We especially want to invite the funders to join us as a giving affiliate and to be part of our evolving philanthropic community. And for those who are interested in deepening your philanthropic impact as members, please join us. And you can always be part of the range of membership options that we have. We have a Caribbean Alliance Council that's a premier convening space that will elevate grant-making practices within the Caribbean and shape the future of philanthropy. So we expect some exciting things there. There's a variety of community stakeholder options. You can join as a implementing supporter if you're a nonprofit organization, an NGO, a non-governmental organization, community foundation, academic institution, businesses, or a civic association. We'd love to have you as an implementing supporter. You play a vital role in strengthening philanthropy across the region. You're able to access regional networks. We have an amazing group of young people, youth, emerging leaders in philanthropy, and they are the next generation of change makers. and they're doing exciting things. You're going to see and hear from them this week during this Philanthropy Week of Action. Of course, there are many other benefits for joining the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance. You can gain a deeper understanding of the Caribbean, maximize your impact, strengthen relationships, and just enhance your reputation joining this amazing regional philanthropic network committed to partnerships and making a greater impact on the Caribbean. Now, I want to move quickly now to our guest speaker. And she is a young star in philanthropy, not only here in the Caribbean, but in the entire world. She's a visionary leader, catalyzing philanthropy in innovative finance, sustainable development, strategic partnerships in Haiti and globally. She approaches her work through this amazing lens of going beyond the surface of the variety of issues that we face in philanthropy, but getting to the systemic root causes, issues of equity, community engagement, and leadership. At the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, Dana Francois steers an extensive economic development and food systems portfolio, championing family economic security through community-driven, sustainable economic development and impact investment catalyzing. Her work is anchored in Haiti. She's led and all of that work has led to tangible improvement in the lives and families of many across Haiti and the region in Americas, in Africa, in Asia, and Europe. She is an amazing human being. You know, in Jamaica, when we meet people, we say, we use this phrase, spirit tech, Miss Spirit Techar. Dana Francois, welcome. Over to you, Dana.
Thank you so very much. It is such an honor for me to be here. Thank you to you, Dr. Hamilton. Thank you to CEO McLaughlin. And I concur in saying that it's been a joy to connect with you both throughout the entire time and also to be closer to the amazing work that the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance is doing. So it is my pleasure today to also welcome all and thank you for this tremendous week. And I will start by, as I was reflecting on this moment today, it dawned on me that I wanted to highlight how our mission is not just important, it is urgent. It demands our immediate attention and action. It is an honor to stand here with you today, distinguished audience of the Caribbean Philanthropic in Action Week. And for this, I want to completely thank and deeply thank the Caribbean Philanthropy Alliance for gathering us. We united by common goals for relevant philanthropy towards a prosperous, resilient, and self-sufficient Caribbean. As we gather here over the next few days, I want to emphasize yet again the urgency of the moment, the vital nature of our collaboration, as you've heard already, and the tremendous potential we collectively hold when our islands, our people, our resources unite under a shared vision. Now let's envision a future where the Caribbean is a global leader in sustainability. By 2050, we will have significantly increased life expectancy, our economies will be thriving, and we will have redefined our relationship with our natural resources. The Caribbean will be a year-round hub for agroecology, biodiversity conservation, renewable energy innovation, and robust economies. The future is not a dream. It is a potential reality we can strive towards and achieve as a united Caribbean community. In this future, Caribbean philanthropy will play a pivotal role in the entire development chain. From grassroots initiatives to policy making at the highest levels, philanthropy acts as a catalyst for change. It is not just a funder, but a facilitator of systems change, a first mover, a seed funder, and a power broker. Our role is to foster inclusion, unity, sustainable economic development across our region, create frameworks built on equity, sustainability, justice, and inclusion. The Caribbean Philanthropy Alliance exemplifies this approach, serving as a unifying force across the entire region. Our region is already leading in climate adaptation, as an example. Barbados' leadership through the Bridgetown Initiative has inspired new climate financing models globally. Across the region, co-ops, rural enterprises, NGOs are working hand in hand with universities and local governments, fostering knowledge exchanges and policy innovation. In 2023, CARICOM announced the launch of a $100 million resilience fund dedicated to small island climate adaptation, a testament to our commitment to regional collaboration. This progress is a beacon of hope, showing that we can collectively overcome climate change challenges and should inspire all of us to do more. This collaboration between philanthropy and CARICOM demonstrates how our sector can be a powerful lever for change. By having a seat at the table with national governments and regional bodies like CARICOM, we ensure that philanthropic insights inform policy decisions, creating a more inclusive and effective bottom-up and top-down development process that is inclusive. Imagine solar-powered desalination plants providing fresh water to entire islands. The development of desalination technology in the Bahamas is already making this a reality. Imagine picture AI, early warning systems that predict and mitigate the impact of hurricanes with unprecedented accuracy. The Caribbean Catastrophic Risk Insurance Philanthropy Facility, the Caribbean Catastrophic Risk Insurance Facility is an adaptation of advanced climate forecasting tech in Jamaica in 2023 is paving the way for that future. Imagine children growing in thriving communities, supported by right-sized local philanthropic investments, strong institutions, and enterprise, bolstered by inclusive development, context-relevant education and healthcare, climate resilience, and effective public service and governance. Women, youth, farmers, and entrepreneurs can access the capital, the resources needed to build prosperous futures. In 2050, we've achieved this vision by cultivating a genuinely interconnected Caribbean, where knowledge sharing and innovation flows across borders. Regional mitigation pathways and migration pathways have opened, underpinned by the 2023 CARICOM Skilled Nationals Agreement. Legal protections have been strengthened, and the Caribbean voice is critical in global negotiations. This is not a dream. This is foresight. It is the future. It is a forecast based on the trajectory we can achieve together if we commit to working differently. This future requires redefining philanthropy to fit the Caribbean's needs, opportunities, context, and vision. The Caribbean philanthropic landscape has come a long way, but there has been missteps. We've seen siloed efforts where initiatives were disjointed, lacking coordination and impact. However, these failures are opportunities for learning and growth. We must strive for a more effective and impactful future in our philanthropic endeavors, building on that learning, constantly adapting and evolving. The commitment to learning and growth is what will drive us toward this shared vision of a united Caribbean and a prosperous Caribbean. Our shared history of colonization and slavery has created deep-seated structural challenges that still shape our present. These legacies of extraction, exploitation, and inequality have left scars in our economies, our social systems, and collective psyche. The history of forced labor, resource extraction, and imposed economic systems still reverberates in the Caribbean today. Through poverty and uneven development and the exclusion of marginalized communities, we continue to experience the effects in our everyday lives. These challenges and complexities must be addressed through addressing in changing how we approach our philanthropy together. But there is a thing. Our past is not our future. We must work to dismantle these lingering systems of inequality and exclusion by creating new frameworks, systems built on equity, sustainability, and justice. It is our responsibility to use philanthropy in its truest sense of the word to shape a better future for the Caribbean. We have more that unites us than separates us, and our bright future must be a shared endeavor. For over a decade, our philanthropic institutions, such as the Kellogg Foundation, that I have the honor to be part of, have steadfastly committed to Haiti and local partners, leading homegrown, powerful initiatives such as the Haiti Food System Alliance. This long-term commitment demonstrates the power of sustained, locally rooted, right-sized, grounded, and patient support. Since its formal launch in 2020, the Haiti Food System Alliance has accompanied over 40,000 Haitian farmers with digital assistance, financing, and market access. The results speak for themselves. Crop yields have increased by 40%, directly improving the lives of 70,000 families. Last year alone, the Alliance has provided nutritionally balanced, locally sourced, homegrown food to 750,000 vulnerable families and children, and facilitated over 2 million in sales from local farmers to buyers. This collaborative philanthropic effort has catalyzed innovation, provided access to capital, and accompanied local change agents, amplifying the impact possible through collaboration yet again. This is poetic justice when we consider that Haitian smallholder farmers played a crucial role in Haitian independence, in the repayment of reparations to France, and in the survival of the Haitian economy until today. As a systems change initiative, the Haiti Food System Alliance exemplifies the kind of impact we can achieve through collaboration and sustained effort. Given our shared heritage, Caribbean philanthropy must adopt such a systems-focused approach to drive meaningful change. This means understanding the interconnectedness of economic, social, and environmental issues and creating inclusive structures that addresses the root causes of poverty, inequality, and environmental degradation. We must move beyond one-off projects or temporary relief efforts to foster ecosystems for sustained growth and development. We must particularly focus on small and medium-sized enterprises, which are the lifeblood of Caribbean economies. Yet, too many budding entrepreneurs, especially in the informal sectors, lack access to capital, where philanthropy can provide what I often call an escalator effect, ensuring that grants, as the first friends and family round, if you will, and early stage investments give entrepreneurs the tools they need to grow, to scale, and access private capital. Philanthropy can help to organize and inform and align the interests of different capital providers to make that escalator effect possible. In the Caribbean, strategic investments are catalyzing significant entrepreneur growth already. For example, the CEF Caribbean SME Growth Fund has committed substantial resources, over $30 million, to foster business innovation across English-speaking CARICOM countries. Additionally, the SheTrade Caribbean Hub has been pivotal in enhancing the capabilities of women entrepreneurs, providing them with essential skills and access to global markets. In Haiti, IFC, in collaboration with Société Générale de Solidarité, is extended $2.5 million risk-sharing facility aimed at bolstering small and medium-sized enterprises in agribusiness. This initiative is expected to provide over 500 loans by 2023 alone. This sort of effort is where blended finance comes into play. It's a strategically used development funding to mobilize capital towards sustainable development in emerging markets and others called frontier markets. At the Kellogg Foundation, we've embraced this approach. For instance, we're the anchor investor in the Impact First Investment Fund with global partnerships, which has provided patient, flexible capital to communities across the world into livelihood support starved of the necessary capital. This effort has allowed global partnerships through that fund to leverage over $70 million since its inception, and they've made one deal in Haiti, but again, we need to do more. Another example is the Kellogg-supported Haiti Peer Learning Network, a decade-old, nearly 200-member network of NGOs, government representatives, much like the effort that Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance is leading for us in the region, with community leaders, funders, businesses across major areas of health, education, and agriculture to think systems, to think long-term, to think deep-seated solutions that are locally owned and locally led and locally shaped. When philanthropy creates this capital continuum, it enables all of our enterprises to do their best to stimulate vibrant local economies. And this sort of success hinges on a few dominant actors, typically, something that we must change and that we can change with the right support of philanthropy. This path of creating economies that are not dependent on a few actors is necessary for that vision that I shared earlier, and this vision that we all share as we advance towards the SDGs and local goals. Philanthropy for the Caribbean thus cannot simply be imported from the outside. It must be Caribbean-centric, responsive to the challenges of the present, while rooted in our shared legacy. This future requires redefining philanthropy to fit our needs, opportunities, context, and vision. We must recognize that philanthropy in our communities goes well above and beyond private philanthropy, encompassing community efforts, remittances, and neighborly support. The Caribbean Biodiversity Fund, as an example, has attracted over $90 million worth of pooled funds towards fiduciary funds across 14 islands in the Caribbean to address biodiversity conservation. And I have the deep honor of being part of that work as the president of the Haiti Biodiversity Fund. Through CBF and other such efforts, ecosystem-based adaptation projects in Dominica, Grenada will restore over 200 hectares of mangroves and continue to enhance coastal resilience. All tremendous efforts and testaments of what is possible with innovative collaborative philanthropy. When discussing Caribbean philanthropy and climate action, we must envision a multifaceted approach. It must involve adaptation, mitigation initiatives, climate education, advocating for climate financing, advocating for climate friendly policies, and investing in climate resilience infrastructure. But above all, locally grown and led climate finance. The expectations are high, but so is our commitment. Climate philanthropy in the Caribbean looks like a coordinated effort that touches on every aspect of our societies, that recognizes the intersectionality of climate challenge in our regions, from coastal protection to sustainable agriculture, to renewable energy and climate resilience, to social impact entrepreneurship, and to the role of women in local communities that are the experts at the front line of climate change and overall holistic community development. As we look to the future, we must embrace innovation, approaches, and philanthropy. And what I want to offer include the three following: impact investment, aligning our investment portfolios and incentives to our mission to create financial returns and social impact that are right-sized. Outcome-based financing, as an example, tying measurable social outcomes in ways that are relevant and doable in our context. Technology-enabled giving, leveraging digital platforms, leveraging new ways of advancing philanthropy, and considering local philanthropy, private philanthropy, and also the vibrant diaspora of our Caribbean community. Our role extends far beyond funding. We have become policy brokers, connecting grassroots innovations with local and regional governments, amplifying the voice of rural communities in decision-making processes. This unique position allows philanthropy to help shape policies that truly serves our community's needs and in the future. Our legacy is one of resilience, but that has come at the exclusion and marginalization, and philanthropy must not shy away from this. Rather, we can and should center ourselves on equity and inclusion, ensuring that those historically left behind, rural communities, women, youth, marginalized groups, are not only part of the conversation, but are leading it. As an example, in Haiti, JECA, a locally led social enterprise working on economic development, is working hand in hand with women, over 300 women accessing capital, ranging from 2,000 to 3,500, to accompany and afford them the resources to exercise their agency and their ability to strengthen their entire communities. Some might argue that the systems-focused approach is too ambitious and that we should focus on more immediate, tangible needs. While I understand this perspective, I believe it is a false dichotomy. We can and must address urgent needs while addressing long-term systemic solutions. It is not an either-or proposition, it is a both-and imperative. Our work in the Caribbean exists in collaboration. Globally, we've seen a shift towards more system-oriented philanthropy. Our time is now. The UN Sustainable Development Goals provide powerful frameworks emphasizing interconnectedness. Initiatives like the Global Philanthropy Forum are fostering cross-sector collaboration, and the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance is bringing us together to do much of the same in the Caribbean. Looking ahead, I see several key trends shaping the future of the Caribbean. Climate resilience as a cross-cutting priority, focus on local leadership and participatory grant-making, greater emphasis on data and evidence-based decision-making. The power of unified action across sectors cannot be overstated. My call to action in closing, the picture I painted earlier of a thriving Caribbean, strong and united and self-sufficient, is within reach. But to realize this vision, we need a unified Caribbean philanthropy driven by a common cause. The philanthropy must break down silos, convene diverse stakeholders, and support innovative, inclusive models of development. I would to emphasize the power of collaboration. This is not just individual efforts, it is a unified Caribbean philanthropy driven by a common cause. For funders, commit to increasing your allocation to Caribbean initiatives. For policymakers, work to create enabling environment for philanthropic inclusion, regulatory frameworks to support impact investing. And for all of us, embrace a collaborative mindset. Create bridges for social impact. Seek out unlikely partnerships. Center the leadership and expertise of those at the front line of the issues that we're all trying to solve. Share knowledge generously. Approach our work with a spirit of humility and continuous learning. Let's harness the power of our connections and commitment to drive. This is a powerful moment for me. As my personal heritage as a Haitian woman, I want to share this with you. Haiti is a nation built on a legacy of self-determination, and this is something that guides me in this work. The motto of my home country, L'union fait la force, unity makes strength, is not just a saying, it's a call to action. Today, I extend that call to all of you. Let's unite in building a future where the Caribbean's most marginalized are seen, are recognized, and given the opportunity to thrive. As Prime Minister Mia Mottley of Barbados emphasized, technology, especially in this day and age, has made it all the more possible for the adoption of that commitment. It's for you now to not have it as an emotional commitment. The Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance, with the powerful conversations this week, is giving us this moment in time, this crucial moment, to set a different path and chart a future that looks much like what I shared about this vision and this dream for 2050, a vision that I know that you all share. And I thank you for this time. I thank you for this opportunity. And thank you for sharing this vision for not only the work that the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance is doing, but also celebrating all the prowesses that we as a region own, and that allows us to reach this future that we all dream of. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donna. Wow, give you a round of applause. Amazing. Thank you for your wise words on a systemic approach to philanthropy. You know, you talk about we must redefine philanthropy to meet our needs in the Caribbean. Absolutely. And a unifying philanthropy driven by a common cause. Wise work. You've heard this very thoughtful statement by Donna Francois. You know, she brings to us an inclusive, equitable, modern vision of philanthropy with grit and grace. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Hamilton. Thank you. It's an honor.
All
Thank you.
right. So we're now going to hear from another dynamic philanthropic leader, And by the way, you've seen only female leaders so far, but I promise you, you'll see some of our male leadership in the Caribbean soon. Suzanne Batten Taylor is vice chair of the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance, and she's a well-known leader in philanthropy. And she understands the value of philanthropy serving organizations, PSO. This is a term we don't use a lot in the Caribbean, but for those of us who are familiar with the concept, we're going to hear more about it from Suzanne Batten Taylor just now. She's going to share her extensive experience as a CEO of ABFE, a philanthropic partnership for Black communities. And she'll also share her valuable insights on how PSOs can strengthen, support, and elevate philanthropic practices, especially in underrepresented regions, such as in the Caribbean. Now, welcome, Suzanne. Glad you could join us. We've just heard from Dana Francois, and she said, we have to do much more to build the Caribbean ecosystem for philanthropy. And she feels that will enable us to address our pressing needs in the region. So I want to start, Suzanne, by asking you, what is the unique value of PSOs, the philanthropy serving organizations? What unique value do these PSOs bring to the Caribbean region? How can we maximize their impact in addressing the region's most pressing challenges?
Yeah, thank
Suzanne?
you. Yes, thank you, Rosalia. And first, let me just give it up for my sister, Dana. She is amazing. And you saw the emotion and the commitment that she has. So I want to shout her out as well. And also thanks to you, Rosalia, for your leadership, Anthea, and the full team. It is good to be here. Philanthropy serving organizations, or PSOs, as we sort of describe them, are critical to impactful and effective philanthropy. We talk about philanthropy serving organizations, or PSOs, as the infrastructure in the philanthropic sector that really makes the sector more impactful. And as I lead probably one of the first, I think one of the first, actually, philanthropy serving organizations in America. And I will tell you the outcomes that we shoot for, Rosalia, at ABFE, the Association of Black Foundation Executives. And I think they carry over to the Caribbean Philanthropy Alliance. But think about the sort of outcomes in three buckets, if you will. One, PSOs, philanthropy serving organizations, or CARIFIL, actually will ensure that the philanthropic sector has a better understanding of the strengths and the challenges facing the Caribbean region. That is really the sort of hallmark of PSOs is grant maker education, donor education. So that's sort of one key outcome. The second is that members and partners of a philanthropy serving organization have the opportunity and the ability to be a part of major initiatives to strengthen a region, a people. That's the second sort of core result. And then the third is that there are deeper relationships between donors and grant makers within a philanthropy serving organization to leverage resources wherever possible. It is often the case that philanthropy, foundations, individual donors are doing really important work, but can be siloed. And again, PSOs have the opportunity to deepen relationships, to leverage dollars for greater impact wherever possible. So those are the kinds of benefits that stem from philanthropy serving organizations and will stem from the Caribbean Philanthropy Alliance.
Okay, wonderful. So what are some of the best practices that you think we can replicate here in the Caribbean?
You know, it's interesting, Dana mentioned a few of them, but I will share that there are three, Rosalia, that are top of mind this morning. One is the opportunity over time to develop peer networks, right? So as we are all organized under the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance, there are opportunities for folks to go deep, for grant makers and foundations to go deep in peer networks and peer communities of which they have an interest in. So whether it's education or whether it's health or whether it's climate, you know, philanthropy serving organizations actually practice organizing of funders and donors that have similar interest. And so that's a best practice that I look forward to exploring and bringing to Caraphil. The second Dana really mentioned, which is to influence policy where possible. Philanthropy serving organizations are often nonpartisan, but we are guided by values and principles, right? Opportunity for all people, equity. And so a best practice of a philanthropy serving organization is to use its power to influence policy across a region, a state, a community, to move agenda, you know, for people that are aligned with the values and principles of that PSO. So that's something else that we can expect over time. And then the third, also mentioned earlier, is data, is to, you know, provide important data on giving in a region or on an issue so that we can spot gaps in giving, we can spot, you know, areas of disinvestment where we need to organize better, but also data on the profession of philanthropy. You know, we talk a lot about the money coming from philanthropic organizations, and that is important, but we also have to pay attention to the professionals in the field of philanthropy and support their professional development, well-being, and retention over time. So those are some best practices that come to mind. Yeah.
Great. You know, as you mentioned all three, the first one, the peer networks, you know, that's the approach we want to take in the Caribbean Alliance Council. And so that's certainly something to note. I am very, very interested in your policymaking approach as well, because, you know, so much of the work that philanthropy does is about inclusiveness and equity and fairness and so on, and getting inclusive policy making a part of our landscape to ensure that we have more information in making decisions to get better outcomes. This is especially so when it comes to climate, you know, and so there's a lot of discussions about making some of those policy-making mechanisms, joint decision-making mechanisms at the level of communities to get better outcomes. So I fully agree with you. And of course, the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance is doing a lot of this kind of community-based work, as well as the data that you point to, collecting data, making sure that it's professional in nature and can help the professionals in the field.
Yeah.
All right. So my last question for you then is why should international foundations now join Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance?
Yeah, and this comes from my vantage point, Rosalia, as again leading one of the oldest and earliest philanthropy serving organizations in the United States. One, we are a global society. You know, we are closer and more sort of connected than ever before. And so philanthropy has a role to play in terms of ensuring better opportunities for all people, for people across the globe. So clearly, I think we want to sort of lift up, this is not just for organizing philanthropy in the Caribbean region. That is critically important, but this is about, you know, connecting to a organized philanthropic infrastructure around the world, and other regions are organized, and that's why we're building Caribbean Philanthropy Alliance, so that we can connect to global philanthropic networks, because we are, in fact, a global society. The root, I often like reminding people that the root of the word philanthropy, it's a Greek word, and it comes, the meaning is love of mankind, or should I say love of humankind. And I think we all could agree that we just need more love in this world when we think about what's happening around us globally. And so just the nature of a connected, strong, global infrastructure to support the well-being of all people, again, is something that I think is in all of our interests. I also think this region, though, Rosalia, is on the front lines of many areas, including the impacts of climate change that's been referenced a couple of times today. Also, I think the support and the importance of entrepreneurship in small businesses. And from America, when we think about the economy in the United States, small businesses and entrepreneurship actually are the heartbeat of the American economy, actually. And so for so many reasons, addressing issues here, like impacts of climate change or ways in which to support small businesses and entrepreneurship, actually has global effects and global learning opportunities for everyone around the world. And then lastly, I would say, particularly for American funders and foundations. I lead an organization that is focused on promoting effective and responsive philanthropy for Black communities. And when we think about supporting Black communities in the United States, it is so clear that I think it's 1 in 5 now, the data suggests, 1 in 5 Black people in the United States have roots in the Caribbean or on the continent of Africa, actually. And when we think about the well-being of Black people in a country like the United States, we can't neglect the fact that their well-being is tied to the well-being of people in this region. So for all of those reasons, I want to encourage global philanthropy, not just philanthropy in the region, but global philanthropy, to pay attention to and engage with the Caribbean Philanthropy Alliance.
Wonderful. Good reasons, Suzanne. Suzanne, before you go, I have to ask you this last question.
Yeah.
You were around, Suzanne, in that meeting we had in Strawberry Hills all the way back in 2019, that Wings Peer Learning Conference that was held in Jamaica.
Yes.
And it's been 5 years, believe it or not. What has it been like for you?
Oh gosh, I get so excited when I think about the trajectory of the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance and the opportunity. First and foremost, this is an alliance that really got started through action with an amazing sort of tree planting activity that happened across the region, demonstrated that there is nothing but opportunity to organize and leverage the relationships and the power of people, philanthropic, organizations and people around the region. So it's been an amazing start, Rosalia. And I can't believe it's been 5 years, but I know the best is in front of us. I'm really excited. Really excited.
Absolutely. And it has been indeed a pleasure working with you. You're an awesome human being. You live the spirit of Ubuntu. And I must say, I thank you so much for your contribution to making the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance what it is today. You were there when we had the idea at Strawberry Hills, remember?
Yes.
It was amazing.
Yes. Thank you, Rosalia. Great to be here and great to be a partner.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're gonna hear now, we're gonna hear a male voice. Women have been leading this charge, and there are many of us in the Caribbean and across the world in the philanthropy space. But we're gonna hear now from Aura Fraser. And Aura is a special advisor to the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance, and he brings a wealth of global experience in philanthropy through his role at the Open Society Foundation. And many of us in the Caribbean know the amazing contributions that the Open Society Foundations have made over the years. And he will certainly share with us the value of the Caribbean Philanthropical Organization, the kind of work we're doing in the Caribbean, bring to this work the kind of perspectives that will help us to understand, deepen our understanding of philanthropy and, make our way in creating the kind of ecosystem that we want. Now, I know Aura is going to do a PowerPoint presentation. So, Aura, over to you.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Good morning, everybody, colleagues of the panel, Rosalie, Anthea, and all the guests on the call. Rosalie, did you want me to project the presentation?
Yes, I think the team will make that presentation,
Well,
or you do it. Not sure, but I know that you believe that there's a unique value that Carrifield Alliance brings to this space, and so really looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, great. Thanks very much. I wanted to speak a little bit from the perspective of Open Society Foundations, which sort of started a Caribbean strategy in 2019. And there were two things I wanted to sort of highlight here. First of all, is the incredible amount of opportunity that exists in the Caribbean. I'll focus on climate, but all across the board in terms of philanthropy, there are so many people with amazing ideas who, albeit frank, cannot find support to bring their ideas to fruition. And hopefully you'll see some of the things we've been supporting in the course of the presentation referred. And then the other thing is a bit the challenges of working in the region and the need to adapt, as Dana and Susan were saying, any philanthropy to the realities of the region, because it's not like funding in Africa. It's not like funding in Latin America. It's a very different context. On the slide there, you can see two things I'm proud of and two very different aspects of the work we've supported. The first was when a young Trinidadian woman and a young Guyanese woman came together and said, we want to connect women across the region to talk about climate, its impacts on us, what can we do to respond, and so on. And that's become an annual event, the Caribbean Women for Climate Justice, where connections are being made across the region, where ideas are being seeded. And the second thing there is sort of the support we've been doing philanthropically to Caribbean governments, because Caribbean governments have limited capacity and limited funds, of course, but they can benefit from organizations of civil society that support them. And after decades, literally, Caribbean leadership led at the UN to the adoption of a multidimensional vulnerability index, which is all about accessing concessional finance for climate responses in the region. Maybe we can go to the next slide. As I say, Open Society Foundation, some of you will know us. It's the largest private human rights philanthropy in the world, founded by George Soros, and works on issues of human rights and intersectional feminism, democracy, governance, and what is grandiosely called future of humanity issues, which are really at the moment about climate and its impact on people and the planet, and artificial intelligence and other technological advances which offer both opportunities and challenges to the world. And you can see in the picture there, Caitlin Carew, who does amazing work across the region from St. Lucia with women farmers on the front lines of the climate crisis, on the front lines of gender in farming, and on the front lines of adaptation. Next slide, please. Thank you. I wanted to just, this is sort of, will feed into the next panel, which is about climate, but the way we approached climate had three dimensions. One was empowering people, because we found a lot of people were concerned about climate, wanted to engage on it but had no support, as I mentioned. So the first part about empowering people was very wide-ranging. I really enjoyed seeing the work done in Barbados using theatre with women fisherfolk to articulate what they thought policy responses should be from government to the climate crisis. We also supported indigenous groups in Belize, Guyana, Suriname, looking at resource management, natural resource management, and food security in the context of climate change and so on. And then, as I say, a whole lot of other issues, a lot of collaborations by young feminists across the region, and so on. As I mentioned, we think that supporting governments is important. We did do that from climate philanthropy funding organizations that could give them technical expertise. And Dana quite rightly mentioned the importance of the Bridgetown Initiative. We were very pleased and honored to support me and Motley from the first Bridgetown meeting in the development of that initiative, which is all about the injustices in the international system. We also supported, as I say, Antigua and Barbuda and other countries on the multidimensional vulnerability index. And then thirdly, we looked at climate justice as from the perspective of global Caribbean visions for the world, because working on philanthropy in the Caribbean is not just about in the Caribbean, but builds on a long history of the Caribbean influencing the world, bringing new ideas to the world. So that work was very wide-ranging. As I say, talked share and loss and damage, about international institutional reform on trade and on finance, and so on. And we also looked at issues of foreign policy towards the region and trying to ensure that Caribbean organizations could engage in Washington, in London, and elsewhere, and bring Caribbean voices from civil society as well as government to bear on global conversations about how the world was engaging on climate. And then finally, we had a whole range of other work that was not climate related, which is sort of more human rights related, supporting Caribbean. As you know, the Caribbean is the leading region in the world on slavery and native genocide reparations, with its commission and mechanisms across the region. And we're very keen to support those visions at this time. And other aspects of the work were about use of force by policing, the decriminalization of poverty, because as you know, Caribbean has this legacy held over of colonial legal regime that maintains things that really criminalize the most vulnerable in society. And we've been supporting civil society actors trying to change those legal regimes. Thanks. Next slide, please. I think I might have missed a slide, but I think it's important to remind us. Oh, maybe it'll come in next. These are some of the initiatives we've supported. So you can see there have been Caribbean, Jamaican activists bringing attention to the situation in the Caribbean to the international bodies such as the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. There have been Caribbean organizations who wanted to bring Caribbean visions to international processes at the International Court of Justice, the Inter-American Court of Human Rights, so to talk about how climate change is affecting the region and what needs to be done to support it, and looking at how at an international level, climate justice is about emitting countries, high emitting countries, supporting the region to adapt. But at the local level, it's also about empowering people to have their voices heard in national debates on where hotels are built, on how can young girls be active in the climate space and talk about what they'd like to see, and so on and so forth. Thanks. Next slide. I should have mentioned at the beginning, it's always a bit shocking to see that the Caribbean is the most climate affected region in the world. It's the most indebted region of the world due to the climate situation in large part. It's the most food insecure region of the world. And it's the most abandoned by global philanthropy, because global philanthropy tends to fund Latin American and the Caribbean, which tends to mean Latin America more in the Caribbean. These are the challenges, and these are the opportunities for Caribbean philanthropists to step up fill that gap, and also for organizations like CarryPhil to make those connections between local philanthropists, but also offer to global philanthropies the opportunity of a mechanism by which to support Caribbean civil society. Because I'll be honest with you, large philanthropic organizations internationally find it difficult to make small grants and sit down with grassroots organizations and people and sort of talk through and take the time to meet them where they are. So an organization like CarryPhil is critical as a connector, both horizontally within the region and vertically is not the right word, but with international philanthropies and say, this is how you can fund effectively in the region. Next slide, please. So just to sort of round up, and Rosalia, I've been trying to be quick, so very happy to answer any questions, but I think, you know, we don't want the Caribbean to be and the Caribbean anymore. And that's why CarryPhil will be a critical actor in trying to say the Caribbean as and of itself, as distinct from Latin America, needs to have philanthropy both from the region and from without to support people to raise their voices and to act to protect the region against all the different challenges it faces. I think one of the challenges for philanthropy, as I say, is meeting people where they are. What I found when I came into the region, having been in Latin America for a while, is that it took a while. People wanted to engage, but they were still thinking through what they could do and how they could do it. And it took time to sit and help them to find out, to articulate what they needed to do sometimes at the very grassroots level. So I think any philanthropy needs to be very patient and sit and help people find out what they'd like to do, and needs to have not these very onerous reporting mechanisms and onerous application methods, but find new ways to let people access the support and benefit from the networks without overburdening them. I think a critical point that Susan mentioned is the issue of systems and trying to connect and not just thinking of individual organizations, but we've been building networks over the last 5 years of people working from different perspectives, perhaps on different issues, but finding each other with themselves in a very organic way to combine forces on different interrelated issues. And that needs to be thought through as well, how philanthropy can support people to find each other and step back from leading, but allow people to find the space they need. This is not that easy in reality because of all the small size of Caribbean nations, how expensive it is to travel between them, our linguistic differences, the differences in political systems, the difference in some legal systems. These things offer challenges for trying to connect and make common cause between different actors, but it offers amazing opportunities for people to find one another, get ideas from one another, and really combine forces at all levels, at the international level, at the regional level, and the local level. And I think, you know, there's a very clear issue that there are a lot of funding left the region for civil society sort of 20 years ago, especially. And civil society suffered a bit from that lack of support, and they've been subjected to the whims of international funders who have a strategy one time and then a different strategy different time. And the local organizations find themselves forced to follow some project that they may not necessarily want to do. So I think Caribbean philanthropy can be much more sensitive to the realities, and this is where CarryPhil again comes in, of trying to meet people where they are and give them the sort of funding they need, give them core funding so they can do the work they want to do and pivot as needed rather than tying them to specific projects. The Caribbean is, I mean, COVID showed it. Things change from one moment to the next. So Caribbean organizations need to have funding to be flexible and move and react. So not limiting them to sort of bureaucratic procedures, and longer funding so they have some certainty about what they'd like to do and how long they're going to have support to do it. So not these 1 year and 2 year grants, but 5 years, perhaps even 10 years would be a great way to try and empower people in the region and all this long tradition of leadership from civil society in the region. And I think, you know, the focus for any work has to be that on ownership by people and empowerment. So hoping to hear more and more about how those sort of principles can be embedded by CarryPhil. Thanks very much. And please go to the next slide, which has more photos of some of the projects we were supporting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aura. Your message, meeting people where they are. And that message aligns with what we heard earlier from Donna and Francois. We must redefine philanthropy to meet the needs of the Caribbean. So we have an awesome challenge in front of us because we understand how much when we depend on others and who have different criteria boxes to tick, so to speak, and we get caught up in that. But again, we have to try, and it's very important because there is philanthropic flows within the region that we can help to redefine in a much more direct way. But one thing I'd love to raise with you, when you talked about your OSF Caribbean initiatives, you mentioned your second bullet was informing government policy. Again, we heard that from both Donna and Suzanne. Very, very important, the role that we can play. Now, we've been typically talking about central government's policy. To what extent, I know you do a lot of community work, to what extent have you encountered local government policymaking? Is that happening? And have you had any experience of working with people closer to the ground, helping to shape local policies?
Well, what a good question, Rosalia. I think it sort of varies a bit because of the varying size of Caribbean states. So you have, Jamaica, which is what, 6 million people.
Not quite.
Or was
About
it two?
three.
From three.
Three.
And then Haiti, which is 11 or 12. So those are countries where there's more of an ability of local governments to take on action. But in the Eastern Caribbean, where you're talking about a few 100,000 people, it really is the national government that seems to sort of take the lead on issues. And I think it's worth remembering that, Caribbean governments are David and Goliath heroes in the international system on climate. They punch way above their weight. They've made incredible achievements across the way. So I think supporting them to do that is very important, and supporting people to engage with them on how to do that. But I think local government is an issue where I sort of didn't find a big place. So I was working very much at grassroots level, and then with NGOs that may work at an international, and then at governments. But the local government in the Anglophone Caribbean was a little bit more difficult to find where the weight was. But I think that's something that CariPhil could explore a lot more, being closer to the ground.
Right. And I think there's a lot of discussion now about the need, especially in the context of the climate challenges, with the people who are directly affected most in communities ought to be part of the policymaking framework and decision-making process. And so that's certainly something, that's a conversation we have. And I think philanthropic organizations have a unique role in bringing people together, not just funders, but other stakeholders to address these needs and can help to shape that framework for decision-making. All right, thanks again so much. We've come to the end of this session, and we are really, really pleased to hear from the leadership of the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance. And now I want to hand over to our premier leader, the CEO of the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance, Anthea McLaughlin. Over to you, Anthea.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosalia. Thank you all for sharing your expertise with our community across the diaspora, in the Caribbean, across the region, and internationally. I feel real excited to be here this morning. Our experts who are at the table and working with us in partnership are passionate and committed to philanthropy and making Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance a force in the region, but also sharing the message and the important message of growing a strong Caribbean philanthropic system in the Caribbean. We heard several messages from our experts. We heard from Rosalia first, who shared that, please come and join CariPhil. It's an exciting time. We have space for you. We are ready to work with you. We're ready to roll up our sleeves, to be part of our peer networks, to be part of our growing philanthropic community. We have young emerging leaders who are here with us, who are going to be the innovators and are going to be the future of Carafil. So we're looking forward for you joining. Dana, we can't say so a lot. We can say so many things about your speech. It was quite profound, provocative, and mobilizing, and motivational and inspirational. Loved your words in terms of speaking about the future, speaking into the future. You shared with us wonderful ideas that we could be a seed for change for the world. You really exemplified and amplified. There's a lot of work happening in the Caribbean as we speak within Haiti through W.K. Kellogg Foundation and through your work that we can share with the world. And also, we have the Bridgetown Initiative that all of you shared that can be a role model in terms of how we bring resources to the table. And that the fact that we have a lot of people on the ground who are experts, who can share how we do and how we bring people together to engage in a climate action agenda. And so I just want to thank you for that as well. And of course, in terms of your sharing, sitting at the table with CARICOM and with national governments is paramount and necessary, and that we have to influence policies to make a difference, that long-term systemic change matters. All this work cannot go for naught. It has to be practices that are internalized within our national governments and in terms of how we do business across the Caribbean within our national governments. And I want to thank you for that. Of course, Susan, you have been here from the very beginning. Yes, you were with us in Jamaica at the Wings event, and you have stayed steady with us. You've shared with the group what Carafil Alliance could be and is in terms of creating a philanthropic support and infrastructure for the region. We're here to support philanthropy in the space, to provide the rails and the guardrails to support the infrastructure of philanthropy. And just want you to say thank you, Susan, for being with us, and just to share with the group that we have an expert that is ready to roll up her sleeves with us to make it possible. And of course, Aura, yes, you are the man in the room with lots of expertise, but expertise that is grounded in experience. You've done the work within the region. You've made it clear that we need more of OSFs in the Caribbean to commit to the Caribbean, to provide resources to the Caribbean, but to stay true and connected. And I know that OSF has done a lot of work in terms of sharing resources, expertise, technical assistance, but also funding and money, which is what we need to move our agendas forward. And I just want to say thank you so much, Aura, for sharing your expertise. And so now we're going to be moving into our session in a few minutes, in 30 minutes time. So please stay with us over the next 30 minutes. Go get coffee, do what you need to do. But please join us for our next segment, which is going to focus on United for Climate Action. It's co-hosted by Wings Network and by Inter-American Foundation, who is going to share with us their expertise on working across Latin America and the Caribbean around supporting philanthropy, as well as give us insight into what climate philanthropy means and what climate finance means. And so stay with us for that, and we look forward to having a powerful, inspiring, productive conversation. So see you in a little while. Thank you so much for joining this morning.
Thank you, Anthea.
Hi, Denise.
Good morning.
Hi. Erica is asking for some assistance. Erica Miller.
Hi.
Hey,
I
Kara.
just was wondering if we were supposed to do a tech check with the interpreters so that they can make sure that all the speakers are clear.
Okay, yeah, I just did. And everybody is in their channel and ready to go.
Okay, and
And then
they've
we
they
have
checked with the other speakers to make sure that the connection is clear.
with the speakers, I was listening to them so far. Let me ask them, can the interpreters hear their speakers well? Can you guys hear us? Well, please put a thumbs up on your screen, on your reactions. Let's see. Good morning, Thea. Okay. Seems like
Excellent.
everybody can hear us. So I do not speak French. I did ask our dear interpreter, Raul. I mean, he offered to put this message on the chat in French. I can come on video and let them know how to access the interpretation language. In
My colleague, my Eugenia, can do it in her intro.
Okay, perfect. Perfect then. Nice to meet you guys. Thank
Hi,
you.
hello, everyone. Thank you all for being here. So I know that, okay, so keep on going. I'm just in the background for this particular segment. So good luck, everyone.
Okay, Erica, we're good? Are you good now?
If the interpreters are good and the speakers are good, I see Cecilia is here.
Mhm.
I think, is Mary Rose in the room?
She's here. I just invited her across. I'll send it again, promote. And Malini.
There's Mary Rose.
Okay, Aura, do you have what you need? You have everything, all the bios and everything? Aura?
Hi, here I am. Sorry. Hi, everyone.
Yes, you have everything that you need.
Everything
to
I need.
begin.
Hi, Erica. Hi, Mary Rose. Hi, Maria.
Hi, Aura.
Hi,
Hi.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Mary Rose.
Okay. So I joined half an hour before. I wasn't sure what was what. So where are we at right now in terms of the session?
All seems to be good. I think your volume is coming in nicely, so I'm assuming that the interpreters have the same. But yes, everything seems to be okay for us to begin. I'm getting thumbs up from, I think, the interpreters.
Cecilia,
Okay.
are you hearing us as well?
Yes, I can hear clearly. Thank you.
How are you doing?
Thanks,
I'm
Cecilia.
doing fine, thanks. How are you?
Nice to hear you.
Good to see you,
Okay.
hear you. I
All
got
right.
the end of your presentation earlier.
Excellent.
Laurel,
So,
if you're starting out, can you also remind the audience that we have interpretation in 3 languages available? That would be
Sure.
excellent. Thank
That
you.
would be great.
good luck, guys.
At what time is our presentation? Erica, are we starting or is it the first session, another session? Is there another session before?
No, it should be us basically now. I think Oro's introducing us, then my colleague Maria Eugenia and I are speaking, and then you'll be introduced.
Okay, great. Oh, well, thank you for your presentation. I caught most of it. I think my presentation is going to sound familiar.
Will be complimentary.
We'll see. Yeah, probably. Anyway.
For the tech, sorry, just to make sure, can we share our own slides?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, so it's on your call, Oreo and Erica. You guys let me know when we're ready to go.
Ready when you are. You going to turn on cameras and so on?
You all can turn on cameras. We will do a quick intro.
Okay,
Let's do a quick intro video.
great.
And you can see the countdown after the video.
Everybody turn on their cameras. I think they should turn on their cameras while the video is going on. No?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Okay. Everybody turn
Me?
on their camera. Okay.
I'm
We
getting
need
a message you
permission.
cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Yeah, I have the same message.
So I cannot
Yeah,
turn
we're getting to
my
that.
camera.
1 second.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
It's still nerve-wracking.
Are you on?
I thought you were going to give someone was going to give an introduction. No. Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the second session of today's agenda of Carrie Phil's event, co-hosted with the Inter-American Foundation and Wings. And this session is about philanthropy for climate and how philanthropy can proactively support the agenda. There'll be a first panel with 4 guests speaking, and then a second panel focusing on data. And I wanted to just give a reminder to everybody that interpreting is available for this in Creole and French. So if you would like to have interpreting, please go to the More tab at the bottom of your screens and select the language you'd like to hear in. So the 4 guests today are Maria Eugenia Paez from Wings, Erica Miller from Wings, Cecilia Babb from the Inter-American Foundation, and Mary Rose Romaine Murphy from the Foundation Communauté Haitienne. Sorry for my bad, terrible French. And I'll introduce each in turn before they speak. So handing over to you, Maria Eugenia, I understand you're going to be speaking a little bit about Wings, and I wanted to sort of welcome you especially as your interest in the Caribbean has been so great over the last few periods. So thanks a lot, and handing over to you.
Thank you, Oro, for the introduction. Well, I'm Maria Eugenia Paz. I'm Senior Coordinator for the Latin American and the Caribbean region at Wings. And I just want to share a little bit about our excitement after listening to the introduction and the first panel. Because as Rosalia and Antia mentioned, in 2017, Wings hosted a meeting in Jamaica, and that was like a seed for the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance. And see this moment and this key week happening in the region is something that creates a lot of excitement on us. Wings, we are a global community of networks and ecosystem leaders. We are a philanthropy support organization or serving organization, as you defined it before. We have currently 220 members in 60 countries around the world, and together with our members, we influence the norms and practices of philanthropy, raise our field's diverse voice locally and globally, and build ecosystems that can reshape development processes and philanthropic action. And in addition to the creation of the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance after the meeting in Jamaica, We also, along with our members in the region, started to work with a regional focus. So we created the Latin American and the Caribbean Working Group. Currently, 52 organizations are actively engaged in the working group, including the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance. And the purpose of this group is to strengthen the philanthropy support ecosystem and unlock the potential of philanthropy in the region. And one of the topics that we have been discussing and prioritizing for the next months and years is multi-stakeholder partnerships and how to engage in different multi-stakeholder platforms and also inform policies. That's something that was mentioned in the previous session. So we are co-organizing with Latimpacto, which is a regional network of venture philanthropy, a regional policy dialogue on building a stronger collaborations of public and philanthropic sectors for long-term inclusive development. This will be hosted on November 13th in Rio de Janeiro, in the sidelines of the G20 events and summit. And again, thank you very much, the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance and Tia, Rosalia, Diana, and all the team for accepting WING's invitation to start dialogues on the role of philanthropy in the climate crisis, specifically about Philanthropy for Climate. That is a movement that Erica will talk about it later. And be part of this initiative. We hope to inspire all of you to take action in front of climate change and engage with the Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance. So thank you very much, and back to you, Ora.
Thanks very much, Maria Eugenia. I should have introduced you more appropriately. So Maria Eugenia is a distinguished international consultant, leader and change maker with over a decade of experience in fostering multi-stakeholder partnerships to mobilize both financial and non-financial resources for civil society in Latin America and hopefully now in the Caribbean. She currently consults for WINGS, a global network of organizations committed to advance philanthropy. Maria Eugenia, thank you very much for your interest in ensuring that the Caribbean is integrated into the working group, because often it's not. So it's fantastic to see your work. And I wanted to hand over now to Erica Miller, who's also from WINGS, the head of climate, where she rallies foundations and philanthropy support organizations around a common goal to catalyze collaborative and integrated climate action. Her previous experience includes working with INGOs and leading the Canadian Philanthropy for Climate movement. She believes in the power of strong partnerships for addressing our world's most complex challenges. Erica has a BA in Global Development and is currently pursuing her MSc in Climate Change and Development at SOAS, a place very close to my heart. Erica, thanks very much for being here. Please tell us more about Philanthropists for Climate.
Thank you so much, Oro. And again, thank you to the CariPhil Alliance for having us, and big thank you to our co-hosts for this session, the Inter-American Foundation. We here today, I'm going to share my screen, give a brief presentation on the work that WINGS does. Oops, 1 second. A little tech glitch, bear with me. Okay, everyone can see my screen properly, great. So today our session is called Uniting for Climate Action, Philanthropy for Climate in the Caribbean. So at WINGS, we lead an initiative called Philanthropy for Climate. What is Philanthropy for Climate? It's a global movement of foundations committed to taking urgent action on climate change. Now, bear with me for a little bit of storytelling. Philanthropy for Climate started as a call from funders within the sector, 14 UK-based funders that made a public commitment, this is back in 2019, to tackle climate change and calling on other funders to join them. This call was a recognition that all philanthropy has a responsibility to act in front of the climate crisis, and that we all have the possibility to do so. It was also a recognition that there was an absence in the philanthropic sector of a platform that facilitated collective action amongst foundations. There was the absence of a common framework, which includes resources and tools to encourage and enable all foundations, regardless of mission, to integrate climate across their work. And it was you know, recognizing again the reality of our sector, that we continue to work in a fragmented way, not only you know, geographically fragmented, but also in the thematic segments in the ways that philanthropy works. Very siloed approaches to different development themes. And so we understood that kind of we were missing that these silos miss out on the power of our collective efforts. And so as we saw this kind of call, this public call from philanthropy to its peers to integrate climate, regardless of your mission, your geographic location, or your size, at the UK level, Wings brought together a task force to say, okay, what would this look like globally? So this task force was made up by 40 foundations and philanthropic support organizations, or PSOs, as we've heard before, from across more than 21 countries, representing over 22,000 funders, to think through, okay, what would this framework and what would a platform look like that would be able to bring in all of philanthropy into climate action? And so we've landed on Philanthropy for Climate. This movement or global initiative is you know, inspired by kind of three main truths. So the first is that the climate emergency presents a serious risk to the pursuit of philanthropic aims everywhere, that if we don't act, we won't achieve our different thematic missions. And that in order to do this, we need a locally led, collaborative, and whole sector approach to address the scale and pace of the crisis. The second is that all organizations, as I mentioned before, do have a role to play in addressing this emergency, regardless of what, you know, your current mandate is as a foundation. And lastly, that philanthropy has immense potential to act when you integrate climate across consideration, so into the operations of a foundation, into the programs, into the investments, etc. So what does the commitment look like? Philanthropy for Climate encourages funders to think about two different things. First, an intersectional approach. So what does it mean for climate to intersect with my work? What does this look like? How does it intersect with the thematics we work in? And second, a multi-pillar approach. So what are the various levers for change that philanthropy has access to be impactful on climate beyond typical grant making, right? So all of these different levers, and I think we've talked about a lot of these today already, on the different power of influence that philanthropy has and the different levers that we can leverage to have action, to take action. It also leverages the different experiences of philanthropy organizations by creating an inclusive community where everyone has something to offer. And we see this here in this diagram through the levels of engagement. So we have getting started, building momentum, and showing leadership. And so this is really about how all philanthropy have a role to play, no matter what part of your climate journey, if we want to call it that, where you are. So, you know, if you're not a seasoned climate funder, but you really know that it's important to start thinking about climate and how it intersects with your work, we have this getting started level where your perspective is very important. It's giving non-climate funders a way to engage, but also leveraging the expertise of, you know, climate leaders to bring in and engage in this peer learning, to bring in foundations that are at the periphery into this global community of action. A unique characteristic about this initiative is that it doesn't focus on scaling up, or sorry, it focuses on scaling up and deepening philanthropic engagement, not just on individual big financial philanthropic contributions. So it's really around all the different ways that philanthropy can have an impact, and all different foundations and all their diversity to join in this collaborative action. So we have 7 pillars, and the 7 pillars, again, encompass all of the ways that we see philanthropy being able to leverage its impact. So the first is on education and learning. And I think previously a speaker spoke about the importance of PSOs in education, grant maker education. And so one of these pieces is really important as the entryway into climate philanthropy around education and learning. And this, we talk about education of not only grant-making staff, but we talk about boards, investment committees, executive leadership, and then also collaborative education with grantee partners and communities within which philanthropy works. We talk about commitment of resources. So of course, this is getting money out the door, right? The typical way that we're acting on climate now. The third is integration. So really taking a climate lens and integrating it across different thematic priorities, integrating it into the operations. So this is the integration piece. We talk about endowments and assets. And again, this is on how are we using, I think Dana mentioned the impact investing, right? How are we using kind of all of the assets of philanthropy to be productive? We talk about operations, greening operations. The sixth is influencing and advocacy, and we've heard this before today, but the power that philanthropy has to influence at the policy level, to convene at the community level, to do the advocacy on climate. And the last pillar is the transparency pillar. And I want to bring out this pillar because this is a key pillar that was part of the commitment around, we didn't want to just put an initiative out there that was a commitment in the void, in the endless void of commitments that are kind of, detrimental sort of to the sector. But how do we really put something together that has an accountability mechanism and a learning mechanism to it? And so this is where the seventh pillar comes in. And through this seventh pillar, foundations that are a part of the movement every year are reporting back on what they're doing across these 7 pillars to do a few things. First is support storytelling. So we know that storytelling is really crucial to bring people in and to spur action. And so through the transparency pillar, we're understanding what folks are doing and then being able to share those stories outwards. It's also there to fill this data gap. So we've been talking about this crucial data gap, and I know this is going to come up in the second part of this session in a little bit, but how are we building out and producing our own data? So in the commitment through Pillar 7, it's really taking the agency of the foundations to give their data, share their data, and grow this community that's driven from the ground up around data. And then the last is around the accountability piece. So, how are we making sure that you're walking the talk of your commitment? And so that's where that number 7 helps. And the last thing I'll say about kind of the framework is that it's by no means prescriptive in the way that all 7 need to be tackled. We understand, the movement itself understands that philanthropies are at a different part of their journey, and what they're capable of doing is going to be different from one foundation to the next, right? So it's really around giving this framework to structure the work in a way that a foundation deems necessary. For a foundation, it might be important to do education first, while others might be advanced on their endowments and assets. So it's really this growing community where the entry point can be wherever a foundation likes. To accompany the commitment, we have an implementation guide, and that's, again, developed by this community of experts around what you can do on each pillar to take action. A really important part of this initiative is that it is driven from the ground up, and it leverages the unique capabilities of local philanthropic support organizations or philanthropy networks like CariPhil in this case, as key drivers of local climate philanthropy. We know, of course, as we spoke about, that the local ecosystem has better knowledge of the local context, trusted relationships with actors on the ground, with foundations that work in that context, and then they can be connected to the global movement through Philanthropy for Climate and through WINGS as a global PSO. These networks play a crucial role in bridging the global movement with local realities. And right now, 90% of signatories of Philanthropy for Climate come through local commitments. So what does Philanthropy for Climate look like right now? Since the launch of the international commitment in 2021, we now bring together over 800 signatories from over 20 countries that are consolidated into 8 independent commitments. And so these 8 independent commitments are driven, as I mentioned before, by local networks in their local context. So we have local networks in the UK, Spain, France, Italy, Poland, Canada, and Brazil was most recently the first in the Global South to launch a commitment that's led by a Brazilian network. And this continues to grow. And this is why we're really keen to have this conversation with you today, because there's ample room for engagement from the Caribbean to hear about your leadership. Some of the achievements and the ways that the commitment has helped spur climate action. Well, we have the implementation guide, as I mentioned, that is available in 7 languages so that we can really bring in the diversity of the philanthropic sector. As I mentioned, Brazil launched We've now seen 3 reporting cycles come out of the UK commitment, and this is really has given us crucial learning on the transparency pillar around what we can do to be supporting those that are part of the commitment and where we need to kind of shift and pivot the implementation support so that foundations can be having can be raising their ambition and continuing to have impact. An interesting example of the Spanish commitment and the power of national support organizations is that the Spanish commitment actually recognized an appetite within the Spanish signatories, to which there are over 250 signatories, that they needed a vehicle for their investments. They didn't know where to look. And so the Spanish commitment, as this network, said, you know what, we're going to give you this. We are going to create, with your help, an investment vehicle through Philanthropy for Climate that then you can leverage. And so this is a really interesting example of how a network responded to a need that was identified through this commitment, and they delivered. What I would also say is that Philanthropy for Climate convenes at different multilateral spaces and policy spaces, including the COPs, including Climate Week, including Climate Solutions Forum and the G20, to bring all of these actors together. And we are continuously engaging in storytelling. So we have a resource bank that includes over 20 case studies from signatories around the world around what's working best for them. And this, as I mentioned before, the storytelling is really key to inspire action and being able to connect signatories from different parts of the world with each other. You know, we've had moments where a signatory in Spain has told a story, and there's been a similar experience from a signatory in Canada, and we've been able to connect them to spark that peer learning so that they can learn from each other and hear about, you know, what worked, what didn't. So why we're here today with Carry Phil Alliance? Well, you know, right now in the 800, there's no Caribbean philanthropy voices represented in this global movement. And we see ample opportunity for that to shift because the region is demonstrating exceptional leadership on climate action, as we've heard many examples from the speakers before me today. The global community can really benefit from learning about regional best practices and priorities that come from local voices. We know that philanthropy has a unique potential to catalyze adaptation and mitigation alongside and with the public and private sectors. And this is where kind of that 7-pillar approach can help structure some of that work. And the importance of the network. So Carry Phil, you know, and other networks are extremely committed to supporting the capacity building and collaboration required to unlock further action locally. I think it was mentioned before the importance of creating peer communities and the unique capability that national networks or regional networks in this case have to be able to convene folk around a similar focus area. And this is an opportunity for us to kind of bring together the climate philanthropy ecosystem within the Caribbean, consolidate it, bring together a collective voice and share it outwards with the rest of the global growing community. I'm going to stop there. We have 2 other speakers afterwards who are going to talk to us about the leadership that is existing in the Caribbean and how this can come into play and start sharing stories with Philanthropy for Climate. So thank you, Oro, and over to you.
Thank you so much, Erica, for the presentation, and congratulations on bringing Philanthropy for Climate together. I think it's a great opportunity to learn between philanthropies and orient the work. And I really like the thinking of not just climate philanthropies, but any sort of philanthropy engaging, because climate change affects us all. So thanks very much. Now I wanted to hand over to Cecilia Babb there in Barbados. Cecilia has been with the Inter-American Foundation's English-speaking portfolio since 2020 as their local liaison. In this role, she provides grantees with the information and guidance they need to achieve their grant results. Cecilia is a project manager and gender specialist who has served in the nonprofit sector for almost 40 years. Her affinity for climate resilience is rooted in the indigenous peoples of her home island, Dominica, and Cecilia, as I said, currently lives in Barbados. So Cecilia, thanks in advance for telling us a little bit about Inter-American Foundation's work in the region and the opportunities and challenges it offers. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Oro, and to everyone. Okay, so you're not seeing my screen. Go back. Okay, is my screen visible to everyone?
It was, but it went again.
Okay, so what should I do?
There should be a share button at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah, I use the share button. So
Cecilia?
do slideshow first.
There we go.
There it is.
Okay, there we are. All right. Thank you so much to Carrifield Alliance, Wings, and everybody else in the background that I do not know of, who's been working to make this a success. So as Oro said, I'm going to, are you seeing my next screen? Because I'm not seeing the arrow to get to the next slide. Okay, there we are.
There.
It's taking its time. So just to say a little bit about the Inter-American Foundation to persons who may not be familiar, I know everybody on the panel is, but the IAF is a US agency. It's been around for a little over 50 years. And the specific focus of the Inter-American Foundation is really to work with grassroots organizations. So it's very much at the level, very much at the level of where the climate issues hit people in their communities. Okay, I'm not doing very well with this slide because I can't see the arrow to take me to the next one.
Celia, do you want us to run the slides for you?
Could you do that, please? Yeah, I had asked because it's kind of slow. Okay.
Sure.
So IF guiding principles are really that IF wants to facilitate self-reliance. It wants to channel funds directly to the grassroots organizations and the NGOs that are at community level, to treat partners, of course, with dignity and respect, valuing what they bring to the contribution, that this is not an IAF investment only, but rather that IAF is partnering with groups that bring investments as well, and to support people, organizations, and their processes, because unless we do that, then we can't have the kind of self-reliance and sustainability that's required for real development to occur, especially around climate resilience. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of the storytelling that specifically IF refers to the work that's being done around climate resilience at the grassroots level as community philanthropy. So here we are looking at people in their communities taking action. Community philanthropy organizations are grant makers that embrace the IF's grassroots model and champion community-led development, shifting grant-making power through a more localized approach. So it's not about resources coming from outside and you being only dependent on those resources, but rather that organizations in communities, in localities, in countries can be part of the grant making as well. So IF's community philanthropy partners reach organizations that a Department of US government really couldn't reach. By working with NGOs, you're able to reach more incipient, more nascent organizations and to work with them. And although the grant number mentioned here is 5K, it really starts about there. So some interventions can cost less than that because people will work with what they have and mobilize the maximum of in-kind and cash contributions to match what's been given by invested by the IAF. But grants can go up and relationships can be long-term. So you might start with 5K or less. And over time, as you succeed, as you achieve the objectives that you set out and realize results, then more resources can be made available through that grant and sub-grant arrangements. What IF is trying to do is to encourage grantees to build networks for grassroots development and to mobilize domestic resources to support it so that they will become less dependent on foreign funding. That's particularly important in the context of climate resilience, because when whatever climate event hits you, it is really at the local level that people pick themselves up. And we know the very heartwarming stories that happen in the time of disaster, where people spontaneously come together and mobilize. And if you have organizations that are already engaged in climate resilience work, then that makes it a bit better and easier, faster to respond and to begin taking action while outside assistance is being mobilized and brought into the national situation. Thank you. For the next slide, please. So by building up community philanthropy organizations and the ecosystems that sustain them, the IIF has developed a local base of support in favor of a stronger civic engagement and the creation of institutions aimed at mobilizing local resources to solve problems. So we do have a culture in the Caribbean. I'm speaking specifically to the English-speaking Caribbean. Marie-Rose will speak to Haiti. We do have a culture in the Caribbean where people mobilize resources. We do have a culture where people collaborate. It's stronger in some areas and not as strong in others. But in this approach of community philanthropy and recognizing what people are already doing, we're trying to make it, instead of being ad hoc, that it is on a more sustained basis, that you're able to bring more of the sectors, the private sector, the public sector, the civil society sector, that they can work in a more long-term and sustained arrangements. So we do know that there are individuals and firms that are willing to give, and like Erica said, sometimes they don't know where to place their resources. Can a more long-term arrangement happen so that the ethic and the practice of community philanthropy can continue and be sustained in a way that's not reliant on foreign funds? So the IIF Community Philanthropy Funders cover a wide range of issues, and that mirrors the IIF portfolio. So environmental management, women-led initiatives, indigenous rights, entrepreneurship and market access, education, migration, food security, sustainable agriculture. All of those issues are covered because you can't isolate one issue from the other. They're all interrelated and affected by the climate events and the changing climate challenges that we're facing. And therefore, all of those have a role in developing climate resilience at the grassroots level. Over the years, since I have introduced the concept of community philanthropy or the approach as a development partner, we've had actually more than 6 grants in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean. And by Southern Caribbean, I'm going towards Trinidad and Guyana, Belize, Jamaica. Marie-Rose will speak to Haiti. So the Caribbean is seen as an emerging sector for that, where this resilience and this notion of philanthropy is being done at the grassroots level, and the mobilization of local resources is from the ground up rather than from the top down. At the moment, there isn't a network because it's just emerging, but the idea is that over time, that will emerge. Next slide, please. So community philanthropy was first introduced by the IIF in 2019. Of course, it had its incubation periods, its germination period, and confidence in the approach is gradually building up. Of the 6 CSO grantees that we started out with, they've mobilized about 40 CBOs, more nascent organizations, in environmental stewardship that enhances climate resilience among farmers, households, communities, and others who are confronting all those climate events that we know challenges. And as I speak today, I'm in Barbados, and I got up this morning to a real wave of Sahara dust. I don't have that list there, but you know, heat, Sahara dust, the sargassum weed, it's a whole slew of things. If you're not confronting one, you're dealing with the other, and one has implications on the other. So what are farmers doing? Farmers are, through the community philanthropy approach, farmers are being facilitated and given exposure and training in climate smart agriculture. So people are using more greenhouses, shade houses, more consistent water harvesting, composting, looking for climate resilience crops. So like we're finding out that the root crops, the root tubers are a bit more resilient when there's a severe climate event. Those may survive, whereas other above ground crops are more likely to be lost, or you have a bulk of them on the ground and then you have scarcity later on. At the household level, what are people doing? People are looking for, they're becoming much more aware of how all those issues are interrelated and looking to make better food choices. People are doing backyard gardens. They also have a level of water harvesting. People are beginning to separate their waste so that they can do a small bit of composting, or they can reduce what goes to the landfill. So not only for farmers, but households can take action. In communities, what we're seeing is people getting together to plant trees on hillsides to slow down erosion. I come from Dominica. You know, the moniker is the nature island. We all just steep slopes, extreme steep slopes. Right across the Eastern Caribbean, you will find that. And therefore, land erosion from slippage is an annual event, sometimes more than once a year. And so people are planting vetiver grass, they're planting fruit trees, they're getting together to do whatever they can. They're rehabilitating riverbeds to contain flooding, mostly using gray or green solutions to do that. So at every level, this community philanthropic approach is happening in terms of the resilience to climate change, to climatic events. And I just want to point out that because it's a gradual process, people are still developing confidence and learning about it, that we have one grantee that took a really long time to take off, but once they got a hang of the approach, they've been successful in recruiting private sector, governmental sector, NGOs, and being able to start gaining some momentum and being an inspiration to other groups as to how this can work. So we found, for example, when Beryl hit the Grenadines, one of the grantees who had been involved in coral restoration, you know, coral restoration is important for fishers because those coral reefs serve as banks and nurseries for fish stock. And one group that had been doing that and had built up relations with the private sector, with tourism companies and entities to do this work, was recognized then as a natural almost actor or lead for redistribution of relief supplies. Of course, that's in the immediate aftermath. In terms of the more long-term things, a lot is happening that we can probably talk about later. So community philanthropy has been a catalyst to build that institutional framework whereby local CSOs and funders can more quickly mobilize resources, both for immediate relief, but with a view towards longer term disaster recovery. In conclusion then, and I don't have the conclusion slide, but let me say that I can identify 3 levels of impact of the community philanthropy that IF has introduced. So at the economic level, we're finding that for every dollar that IF invests, communities, organizations are able to match that by about $1.40 to $1.70. What that means then, it is spread between in-kind and cash donations, but that is a significant economic impact that this is having. At the cultural level, people are reminded that, hey, we used to get together and we normally get together at crisis times, but do we have to limit it to crisis? No. We can begin to resuscitate those collective actions that we typically did. We talk about our grandparents and our parents. We hear stories. Those of a later generation might not have been so involved in it, but people have seen the resonances between what was culturally done and what community philanthropy does. So you have GAIAP in
Cecilia,
Trinidad.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up, please.
Okay, I'm
Thank
wrapping
you.
up. So we have GAIAP in Trinidad and CUDME in Dominica. You have the credit, you know, where people pool their cash resources. So that is being that is one area of impact. And then developmentally, organizations are building a long-term commitment to this approach. And the partnerships that are being formed are moving from an ad hoc, you know, I come asking now, to more long-term commitments. And in doing that, we can see that at the community level, it is possible to mobilize resources in a sustained way, but there needs to be a support framework that helps it to build on. And thank you very much for your time. Apologies for going over.
Not at all. Thank you very much, Cecilia, for a very interesting presentation. You know, I'm sure everyone would like to know more about your grassroots philanthropy approach, and it's very interesting to hear how you're managing to get resources to the grassroots level, which is a difficult thing for philanthropies to do sometimes, but the most important thing for them to do. Well, I wanted to pass over then to Marie-Rose Romain Murphy from the Haiti Community Foundation. I won't risk saying it in French again. Marie-Rose is the president of RMC Romain Murphy Consulting, a nonprofit management and strategy firm that works internationally with a wide range of organizations, from small grassroots local organizations to large 1 billion institutions working globally. She consistently serves as an effective partner for community change. Born and raised in Haiti, she is a social entrepreneur who has helped us to launch several work programs and organizations, including the ESPWA Incorporated, the Economic Stimulus Projects for Work and Action. That's a Haitian organization focusing on the long-term development of Haitian organizations working in Haiti. She's also the co-founder of the Haiti Community Foundation, Haiti's first community foundation. She has more than 30 years of experience and a strong track record in community development, human services, and other areas. She provides thoughtful leadership in anti-racism, localization, decolonization, aid restructuring, and community-led structural adjustment. So over to you, Marie-Rose. Thank you very much. You're on mute.
All right. Thank you very much, all, for the introduction. Thank you, Carrie Field and Inter-American Foundation and Wings for inviting me to be on this panel. You know, I am so excited about seeing the collective action that's being done. Let me see now if I can share my screen. Let's see. Okay, can you see my screen? Okay, perfect. Why locally led climate action is critical. And I want to emphasize it by saying critical. First, I'll talk a little bit about Fondation Communauté Haïtienne Espoir. And Espoir means hope in Haitian Creole. And people in the community, when we had to name the Haiti Community Foundation, insisted to have the word espoir in it because it was a bit of a rallying cry. We launched after the 2010 earthquake, which was traumatizing for Haitians everywhere. And we realized that what was needed was a different model for involvement and community development, humanitarian in Haiti. Something that was led by the communities, which basically have been marginalized from the development process. So we're a Haiti-led, Haiti-based, community-led, and centered community foundation, Haiti's first community foundation. We are set up as a national network of regional funds. We started in the Grenas, which is key for Haiti's environment and food security. We expanded in the Grand Sud. It's a region that's extremely vulnerable to natural disasters, with experience earthquake, hurricanes, like Matthew and everything else. And you can also look at COVID-19. We also work nationally. So our commitments, we are committed to ecosystems, community, and nation building. In Haiti, I mean, as you know, and we've been dealing with crisis for a long time, it has damaged and fragmented the fabric of our social systems. So for us, it's bringing people together, leaders together, communities to connect with each other, regions to other regions, and really build a nation, which is something that basically the people of the country should be doing. Sometimes people talk about, donors talk about, oh, they're doing nation building. They are not supposed to be doing nation building. They're supposed to support people to do nation building. So we talk about how we work with and for communities. And it's important to stress that because a lot of people talk about how they work with communities. And frankly, and there's also this talk about participation revolution, but in so many ways, we feel like communities, it's a human right for communities to be involved, lead different interventions and strategies that impact, them. Just wanted to put some nice pictures of Haiti, as so many ugly pictures. And it's not that we're not in trouble, but it is still, as far as we're concerned, and in reality, one of the most beautiful countries in the world. Thank you. Let us see. Climate action need. 70% of Caribbean nations are made out of coastlines. So I'm not saying anything that hasn't been done that all of you who are involved in this don't know. So we're talking about rising ocean levels, more powerful hurricanes, erosion, loss, droughts. Let's not even talk about the loss of lives and the loss of livelihoods, which is critical. Then Haiti is particularly at risk. I think everybody knows, how much trouble we are with multiple political, social, economic, and humanitarian crises. Okay. So, I mean, it's interesting. It's all interesting to the extent where, most people don't realize how much we are sitting on a lot of natural resources, including oil and iridium and gold that are untapped. So this is a graph from ACAPS that shows actually how Haiti is particularly at risk within the next couple of years in terms of the impact of La Nina. We're talking about wildfires, droughts, heat waves, crops, I mean, just everything. Food insecurity, which we're dealing with. It just seems to be, frankly, endless. So it's the increasing impact of the climate crisis. Why a regional approach? So at the macro level, we're talking about, I don't think, it was interesting because, when you talked about climate justice, we cannot talk about climate without talking about human rights and the concept of climate justice, of justice and inequality for that matter. Inequality of conditions, you have global north countries and their consumption, and the fact that, global south countries like our countries being, negatively impacted while we're not necessarily causing a lot of this. Unequal access to resources and structural issues such as climate action financing, package as financing to countries that are already overburdened by debt. This is something that people are discussing at a high level, talking about policies and everything else. So what's the impact? I mean, if you have a lot of debt, obviously you're busy sort of paying it, and it limits the funding that you have to support your population or even impact, the management of resources. And it's increasing the poverty and the dependency. So obviously it's all connected. So other dynamics that are frankly damaging is the fact that, philanthropic funds go largely to global north networks and organizations. And most of these they don't really include global south, the population that are affected. As a result, and I am separating action from intention. People may have the best intention, but the reality is that if you're living in the countries, you have deep roots in them, you have a sense of urgency if you really care. There's a sense of proximity because basically you're feeling it. The cultural understanding and the perspective. You're here. If you're not going anywhere, then at this point, if you're looking at yourself and the future generation, you want to make a difference. There's also the question of knowledge base and research, okay? That for the most part is not generally integrated into the planning, the design, the implementation of climate action. There's a little bit of that that's being done, but in general, a lot when it comes to the solutions to climate change, the strategies for climate action, is really coming from the global north. And really, this has to change. It really needs to change. So, what is the rationale for a regional and locally led approach? After Jovenel Moïse was assassinated, the president of Haiti, in 2021, our organizations actually organized a series of webinars to show what directions the Haitian leaders were thinking about and doing, were working on in terms of different issues. We had one on the environment. And one of the things that really struck me was Philippe Bayer, who was co-founder and CEO of the Haiti National Trust and the Haiti Audubon Society, talked about very calmly. It wasn't coming from an extremely activist, even though he very much believes in action. He just basically said that they started the fund because they realized that over 10 years, multilateral funders had invested about $500 million US dollars in the environment, and that there was nothing. He actually said there was nothing to show on the ground. And not talking again about intentions, but again about action and about outcomes and impact. Local and national organizations have a vested interest in the environment and everything that supports them. More holistic, okay? And, we have a longer term approach. We're thinking about our children. We're thinking about us. We want things to change, and we realize that things are connected to the extent where you cannot talk about the environment without talking about the fact that you have poor to very poor populations that will not manage the resources well, okay, if there isn't some proper strategies for economic development and some good strategies in terms of social protection, okay? I should talk about some of,
We seem to have lost Rosemary. Maybe we'll wait a few seconds to see if she can reconnect. we don't have much time, so I think maybe what we could do is, I wondered if there are any questions from the audience for our panelists. If not, I think what we might do is just wrap up this session. So thank you, Maria Eugenia. Thank you, Cecilia. Thank you, Erika. And Maria Eugenia. And if Maria Rose manages to come back, we can let her finish up. She was just on recommendations. I don't know if any of the panelists had questions for one another. I find sometimes we forget to let panelists interact amongst themselves. No pressing questions?
No, no
Okay.
pressing questions. I got lots of literature.
Lots to think about. But for
Yes.
me, Marie-Rose made a lot of important points about connecting people in common cause, and about the need for supporting people's leadership, rather than the error of many philanthropies, which is to sort of determine the thing and think that the philanthropy is the protagonist. It is not, and it shouldn't be. I also was grateful for Marie-Rose for highlighting again the beauty of Haiti, because we all see the bad news repeated in the news, but never the wonderful things about the island and its rich cultural, political, social history. And again, this issue of leadership coming from below is not the word, but from the people rather than others. So I valued that. So I think, thank you again, panelists. We can move over to the next panel, which has two. Go ahead. You're back, Maria Rose. Did you want to
I
finish
am
up?
back, and I apologize.
No problem. These things happen. Welcome back. Did you want to finish off
Yeah, I
in
do
30 seconds?
actually. Let me be very quick about it. My apologies again. I got a signal issue.
You were on your recommendations.
Yeah, I was on my recommendation, and let me share my presentation again. Oy, oy, oy. All right.
Don't worry, you can just do it verbally. That's fine.
Okay, let me do that verbally in terms of the recommendations. Can you hear me? Or
Yeah, loud and
okay.
clear.
So my recommendation at this point, because there's a part of me that feels like I should talk about some of the things that we're doing and the larger vision. Okay, but we need to talk about the ecosystem of local and national Caribbean organizations. Whether we're talking about conservation funds, community foundations, civil society organizations, and alliances focused on advocacy, all of these should be strengthened for maximum impact and effectiveness. And in terms of government capacity, I heard some of that earlier, it should also be a focus to comprehensive strategies that frankly should include debt forgiveness and reduction. You cannot, expect people to just do what they need to do with, hands tied behind their backs because of the debts, the unrealistic debts that they have to deal with, okay? Then agendas for climate action should be designed and led by Caribbean countries and network with a connection to global action. The reality is that, and we have we have to change the concepts that we have right now with what we're facing in terms of climate action. Right now, we have the idea about borders need to be reinvented, not only because of climate action, but also its impact as far as migration and everything else. And to realize that, these artificial borders, and these borders that very often are the remnants from, colonialism, okay, are not working nowadays, okay? And the fact that we're all impacted globally. So we may look at it regionally, but, on the other hand, we have to look at the larger global framework. So that's really part of what I'm talking about. Very quickly, I just want to finish by saying thank you, merci, merci en pile, and finish with a quote from Chief Seattle. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. And that's why we should do this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary Rose. And I think this emphasis you've placed on empowerment and ownership of the people, of rights holders, is critical and something that still needs to be done more of in philanthropy. And I know Carrie Phil is an organization that's committed to that in its work and its connecting philanthropies and philanthropy. So I'll move swiftly over to the next panel. We have two very esteemed guests. Sasha Jatan Singh is a climate finance and participatory environmental governance professional with over 15 years of experience in the public, international development, and civil society sectors in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean. She is currently the loss and damage expert at Climate Analytics Caribbean, where she works with Caribbean SIDS to address critical issues relating to loss and damage, adaptation, and climate justice. Sasha has a strong background in environmental and climate policy, climate finance, participatory governance, grants management, capacity building, science communication, and much, much more, as I know myself. So Sasha, thanks for coming, and please go ahead to talk a little bit about the opportunities and challenges of data for climate action. Thanks.
Hi, everyone, and thanks so much, Oro. And so that's my old title. So I Commonwealth National Climate Finance Advisor. I'm the loss and damage expert currently at Climate Analytics Caribbean. And today I just wanted to talk about. Can you just let me know what you're seeing?
We're seeing the title slide, a review of loss and damage in the Caribbean.
The entire screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So in terms of my role at Climate Analytics Caribbean, there's a focus on loss and damage finance in the Caribbean, and I know a big issue with loss and damage is data, and how can we utilize data? How can we, collect data, analyze data, and so on to enable accessing and channeling much needed finance for loss and damage activities. So that's what I really want to discuss today, and then looking at what philanthropic organizations can do and how can they start considering loss and damage finance in their strategy moving forward. So just a little bit about climate analytics. And Climate Analytics is a global climate science and policy institute engaged around the world in driving and supporting climate action aligned to the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming limit. And we're headquartered in Berlin, Germany, but our newest office is in the Caribbean, based in Trinidad and Tobago. And the work of the Caribbean office is to really connect science and policy to, national policy making, how to connect the international climate change negotiations with national and regional policy making, how to inform national planning, and so on. And then also how to work with civil society organizations in the Caribbean, how to empower them to engage on decision making, on capacity building, and how to work with really ensuring that climate action happens, and climate finance is channeled to the most vulnerable communities and regions that need this the most here in the region. So, I think because my focus is on loss and damage finance, is really useful to provide this this update on the loss and damage fund and so on, since that's been the hot topic for the last few years. And just a bit about what exactly is loss and damage, and I think this is quite useful, this framing, which is from the UNFCCC And loss and damage could be broadly understood as the adverse impacts of climate change that occur despite or in absence of actions to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or mitigation, and also to build resilience or adapt to the current or future climate change or adaptation. And there's no official definition for loss and damage, but it could be broadly understood to be this. And addressing loss and damage is considered the third pillar of climate action, as insufficient mitigation and inadequate adaptation leads to loss and damage. And as you can see from this diagram, there are different aspects and elements of what makes up loss and damage. And we could have, extreme events, which we know as, the tropical cyclones, hurricanes, droughts, storm surge, flooding as well. Or it could be slow onset events like sea level rise or loss of biodiversity or desertification. And also loss and damage could be, economic impacts. And that's, any sort of impacts that we can assign some sort of financial value to. So that could be, losses and damages related to business operations or to physical assets like damage to property or infrastructure, or it could be non-economic losses and damages. And that's a bit more difficult to, to estimate and to find some sort of value, financial value, but it happens and it's quite important, especially for climate vulnerable countries like Caribbean states. And that could be, some examples could be loss of life or impacts on health. Also looking at loss of cultural heritage, loss of indigenous knowledge, and loss of identity. What does it mean to be someone from a small island if our territory, our land is being lost due to sea level rise? So these are a lot of, I would say, esoteric, philosophical discussions, very deep, heavy discussions that come into what this understanding of what loss and damage is. And in terms of the history of loss and damage, it's not a new concept. It actually was introduced in 1991 when the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change was being negotiated. It was put forward by Vanuatu, this insurance mechanism for sea level rise, which it was ultimately rejected. But it took about 30 years since then until COP27 in Sharm el Sheikh in 2022 for us to move from loss and damage and this need to include loss and damage finance formally, to have a loss and damage fund established. And that happened at COP27 on the very last, actually was the day after the COP was officially supposed to end. It was agreed. And then last year at COP28 in Dubai, on the very first day of the COP, the loss and damage fund was operationalized. So you see there's a lot of quick movement on why loss and damage and the need for loss and damage finance and this fund has really, the momentum has really grown, the urgency has really grown. So this is a key issue, I think, for philanthropic organizations to consider, especially for highly vulnerable SIDS. And just a bit of an update on the loss and damage fund. Right now, a board has been, established, and they've been meeting over the course of this year. And at COP, which will happen in the next few weeks, they're supposed to provide recommendations to the COP on the board, on the governance arrangements, on the structure, and so on and so on. And this is just some key highlights. The first board meeting was basically, the co-chairs elected, subcommittees formed, and so on. At the second board meeting, this is where the fund got a name. The official name now is the Fund to Respond to Loss and Damage. The fund also got a home in Manila, in the Philippines. And then also the teams of reference for the executive director was agreed. And, last month at the third board meeting, the fund got a new executive director, Ibrahima Sheikh Diong, who's a joint US and Senegal citizen. and also hosting agreements and trust arrangements with the World Bank was also endorsed. And at the fourth board meeting, which will happen after the COP, which will be in December, this is where the actual meat of the operations of the fund will take place. So looking at eligibility criteria, who's going to access the fund, what are the sources of funding that could actually fund this loss and damage fund. So all of these things will be discussed then. And I think it's interesting to know that this is happening and there's this need for loss and damage finance. So it'll be useful to have how can philanthropic organizations interested in climate change, how can they align, or how can they contribute to what's going on internationally in terms of this new fund, the fund to respond to loss and damage being established. They're going to be discussing sources of funding. They're going to be discussing eligibility criteria, access criteria, and so on. And at the same time, also looking at how could philanthropic organizations also assist with the national policies and commitments set out by countries, because countries are also developing their second nationally determined contributions, their NDCs, which will outline, these are their commitments in terms of climate action, and also outline these are the financing needs required. So these are some, I would say, some important, I would say, decision-making tools to help philanthropies, better align their strategies and so on to what's happening globally in terms and nationally in terms of climate action. And all that being said, we still need data, right? And Climate Analytics Caribbean released technical report called a Review of Loss and Damage in the Caribbean, 1994 to 2004. And this was launched at the UN Climate Change Conference in Bonn in June of this year. And this is the link for it, and I definitely encourage you all to take a look at it. And the reason why we decided to do this report is because even though there's been, widespread loss and damage experienced throughout the Caribbean, there hasn't actually been a comprehensive assessment of loss and damage in the region. So we don't actually know, some of the research questions were like, how is loss and damage being framed in the region? What are some of the existing tools and methodologies that are being used to assess loss and damage? What is the extent of loss and damage that has been experienced in the region? And then what are the projected future costs of loss and damage for the region? All these things we don't know, even though we know it's been experienced, and we've already, right now, and most recently we have tropical storm or Hurricane Oscar affecting Cuba, right? And this is quite late in the hurricane season. And in terms of the methodology and approach, this is all desktop review that was done using, national reports to the UNFCCC over the last 30 years. And it also included publicly available assessments for specific climate disasters in the region within that 30-year period. And some of the key findings, and as I said before, there's no internationally agreed definition of loss and damage in the climate change regime. However, loss and damage is consistently framed as a climate justice issue by Caribbean SIDS, requiring international support as opposed to national responsibility. And I think that's quite important in terms of how we frame loss and damage and the need for loss and damage finance to come to Caribbean countries to help address, the adverse impacts of climate change and loss and damage. And then in terms of the methodologies that exist to assess the cost of loss and damage, we have two key ones: the damage and loss assessment, or the DALA, which has been led and developed by the UN Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, UNECLAC. and also the post-disaster needs assessment, the PDNA, which has been developed by the World Bank. However, none of the methodologies used in the region to assess loss and damage currently utilize the specific UNFCCC framing of loss and damage. And that's like the diagram I had showed early on. And some
Sasha,
other
I have to ask you
sorry.
to wrap up, please.
Sure, no problem. So in terms of some key findings, I think what is quite useful is that, almost all CARICOM countries actually mention loss and damage in their latest nationally determined contributions, which show that this is a real issue. However, most of the loss and damage assessment really focus on, on loss and damage from hurricanes or floods and not any of the other climate hazards. So we're really missing what are some of the other hazards. And then also, also the existing studies, they tend to focus on specific climate events, and they don't provide a holistic account of what is the total loss and damage experienced by the region. And in terms of recommendations, a few, I think I'll highlight just two of them I think is quite important. One is to develop and use a common regional approach for loss and damage assessment and reporting. And this is quite important for the Caribbean to really decide what, how do we define loss and damage? How do we assess the cost? How do we assess the cost for actions to address loss and damage? And then the other one is to develop national plans or programs to address loss and damage. And this is quite important because it would help to develop what is the national approach for addressing loss and damage. And it could lay the foundation for accessing finance, be it from the UNFCCC, be it from, private sector and philanthropies, be it from bilateral donors. And I think that's quite important. And when we're thinking about that, we're seeing that there are a lot of data gaps. And it's quite important to look at how philanthropies could position themselves for supporting, contributing to loss and damage finance for the region. And it's quite useful to understand what the gaps and needs are for loss and damage finance in the region. And those two recommendations, there are more, but I'll just do that, are two key ones. How can philanthropies support, developing plans or programs to address loss and damage? It could be national plans, it could be regional plans, or even very local plans. If it's, fishing communities, for example. And then also looking at what are entry points for philanthropies to support, enabling loss and damage finance. Is it through how do we develop these loss and damage assessments and reporting tools and methodologies? Is it on how do we improve on data collection for this? So I think it's how do we look at loss and damage finance, and how could philanthropic organizations really support this? Because we've identified this as a real need, not just on the international level, but also, regional, national, and also local as well. So I think that's it for me. Thank you so much. And yeah, looking forward to the rest of this really exciting webinar. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Sasha. I really like the way you connected the international aspects of climate justice and the need for high emitting countries to support Caribbean initiatives to adapt and also to address the issue of loss and damage. So, and the question you pose about how can philanthropy support Caribbean actors to act on the challenges about loss and damage and support countries to understand it better, to get the data, to have the plans in order to take that again to the international arena. So it's sort of a circle that we're very glad that you highlighted. I wanted to move over to Malini Maharaj, who's currently an assistant lecturer in the Department of Economics at UWI in San Agustin, where she's been for 19 years in various capacities. Apart from teaching, Ms. Maharaj has also been involved in research on projects on topics involving governance and development, poverty and the environment, sustainable development and environmental economics, consulting with a range of organizations. So again, thank you for being here, Malini, and very interested to hear what you think about data and facing up to climate change and its impacts on our societies, and the linkages you see between that and the potential for philanthropy from the region to push the region forward. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you, Oro. Good afternoon, panelists and participants. I think it is a pleasure to be able to follow up with my presentation after hearing from the panelists, Sasha, Marie Rose, Erica, and Cecilia, particularly as it speaks a lot to what climate change means at the microeconomic and macroeconomic levels. Particularly when we speak of development, there is this emphasis that development should really be led by the individuals and not by a governing body. And when we look at climate change in particular, we see greater impact in terms of how individuals at the grassroots levels can create developmental strategies that can deal with the issues related to climate change. And one manner in which this can be facilitated is through capacity building. And my presentation itself was actually facilitated through a capacity building training program where initiatives were taken for members of the University of the West Indies to be able to learn about climate change and its various modalities, of which climate finance tracking was one of them. So essentially, the content itself was developed through a collaboration of various entities. So you would see the Global Environment Facility, UNEP, the EMA, and the UWI as being collaborators for the development of this capacity building program. And the intention is that the university will be able to provide this capacity building to NGOs, CBOs, in such a way that philanthropy and philanthropy organizations can also benefit by having this knowledge so that they can understand what goes into all aspects of climate change data and the data needs associated with it. Primarily, what my presentation would cover is really just an appetizer of a really bigger menu of issues related to climate finance and climate finance tracking. As the Paris Agreement requires, countries that are parties to the Paris Agreement are required to complete what is now called a biannual transparency report, of which there is a requirement called the Enhanced Transparency Framework. And I believe it was Erica who had presented a 7th pillar highlighting the role of transparency. And as we speak of climate finance, we see that there are gaps in climate finance when we match climate finance needs with climate finance provided. And we see the need for climate finance tracking to fill these gaps where data requirements will be able to ensure that the limited resources that are allocated towards climate finance are used in the most efficient and effective manner possible. And for this to be done, it requires the capture of data through monitoring and evaluation so that we ensure that where climate finance is indeed provided, that it is allocated in the best ways possible. So without wanting to be too academic, I think, just to clear up the understanding of what is climate finance, and as Sasha would have pointed out, as it relates to loss and damage, there is really no agreed definition for climate finance, as there is no agreed definition for loss and damage. But certainly, according to the UNFCCC, we can relate it to the local, national, or international financing that is directed towards climate change mitigation, and climate change adaptation. Now, one of the most important principles within the Paris Agreement that I think bears significance to developing countries, especially in the Caribbean, is the principle of common but differentiated responsibility and respective capabilities. And what this essentially means is that as it relates to climate finance, it means that climate finance operates under this principle, which emphasizes the responsibility of developed countries to assist developing countries in implementing climate objectives, which acknowledges the varying contributions to and the capacities for addressing climate change, such that developed countries are the ones with more financial resources and are therefore obligated to support those that are less endowed and more vulnerable. So it is this obligation under the Paris Agreement that makes climate finance important, and particularly where it is recognized that it requires significant financial investment. So if we look at some of the data, again, getting back to the point at hand, we see estimates of climate finance needs in developing countries amounting to some 5,817 billions of US dollars. And that is for their nationally determined contributions, which relates to mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. With regards to adaptation, the needs in terms of finance needs, climate finance needs, are estimated to be 135 billions of US dollars. So this gives an idea of the volume of financing that is required for respective mitigation and adaptation needs. Now, just because we say these are needs, it does not necessarily mean that these needs are what are being provided. So there is a difference between climate finance needs, climate finance mobilized, and climate finance provided, which implies that there are also climate finance gaps. So a financing gap is the difference between financial flows and the average needs to meet the long-term goals of the Paris Agreement. So when we look at amounts provided and mobilized by developed countries, we see that in 2022, for example, there would have been over 100 billion US dollars mobilized in terms of multilateral, bilateral, private dollars, US billion dollars from developed countries for climate finance. Again, suggesting a lot of financial support being mobilized. It does not necessarily mean, however, that these are being provided. To understand, therefore, the difference in terms of what finances are being provided, what are being mobilized, and what the gaps are, it means that we need to track climate finance. And tracking climate finance allows us to understand the allocation of these limited resources and how to understand whether the limited resources are indeed being directed towards the objectives that they are created for. So climate finance tracking as part of the Paris Agreement is an obligation where developed countries are required to report the support that is being provided, as well as developing countries are required to report the support that is needed and received via climate finance. And there are standardized accounting methodologies. There is a standardized reporting format in the form of a common tabular format, which each country are required to submit this type of data into. In Trinidad and Tobago, we actually, through the capacity building initiative, were trained in what has been developed as a national transparency system, which allows stakeholders within Trinidad and Tobago to input data in a specific manner that will feed into the national transparency system, and that will go towards the reporting requirements for the enhanced transparency framework for the Paris Agreement. So this year, in fact, November of this year, we are required to submit our biennial transparency report, and the data that goes into the biennial transparency report, as is a requirement of Article 13, as developing countries should provide information, would be fed by the national transparency system. And the data into the national transparency system comes from the grassroots levels of our national stakeholders who would have been trained in developing indicators and collecting data that will supply this report, the biennial transparency report.
Malini, you've got about 30 seconds left.
Thank you. So as you can see, tracking is important. It means that we are mobilizing the resources, but also tracking how the resources are utilized. So monitoring and evaluation allows us to ensure that limited resources are allocated in the most efficient manner, and this is where data comes in and how we are able to track the use of the data at national and international levels. And ultimately, it means that we are required to ensure that this tracking system allows us to utilize climate finance in the most effective manner and therefore achieve our climate goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sorry to hurry you, Malini.
That's fine, that's okay.
No, I think what your kind of overview of the challenges of climate finance at the global level is a very useful way to sort of frame the conversations today and look at the need, especially at all levels, to have transparency and ensure that there's good governance of the funds that are secured for adaptation, mitigation, and other aspects of climate action. So thanks very much. There was a question someone raised a hand, and I'd like to give them a chance. It's Colin Bogle, who asked for a chance to ask a question. Colin, can you come in? Can we make sure that Colin can talk? Very quickly, Colin, a question, please, rather than an extended comment.
Hello, good morning, rather.
Thank you.
I was asking, what is the proportion of climate finance that is required relative to global GDP? Because I remember hearing that it was actually something like 1%. And some of the methods I've heard for raising that funding stem from just taxing the 0.1% of people who hold, I believe, like 50% of the wealth relative to the bottom 50% of people on the globe. So I'm wondering if that is the case, if it's like a relatively small proportion, could it actually be allocated through just taxation of elite groups, or are there other ways to raise that money?
Thanks, a very interesting question. Malini, Sasha, do you want to come back in sort of 10 seconds each?
In terms of financing, there are different instruments. So essentially, climate finance can come through bonds, grants, loans, different lines of credit, equity. Taxation is not essentially one of the main sources of climate finance, but individual governments would have their respective ways of financing national climate finance. So carbon taxes, for example, can be used as a source of climate finance at the national levels. In terms of overall percentage of climate finance, I can tell you in Trinidad and Tobago, about $0.1 million was allocated towards climate finance as compared to $1.48 billion that was actually given to the region.
So thanks, Malini. Sasha, did you want to jump in?
Sure. And I think what I think is Colin was referring to is this wealth tax, where what we've seen is when you're looking at inequalities and income inequality and wealth inequalities, a lot of inequalities can be actually leveled by taxing the super rich, which is what there's been this momentum and advocacy in the UK and the US and also in Mexico and so on to tax the top, 1% and 5%, to do that because that's where a lot of the money is gotten, that's where they have a lot of the money, a lot of the wealth is at the top, 1% and 5%. So that would be quite interesting. It's a new platform and mechanism that's being discussed, that's being advocated throughout the world, particularly in developed countries, because they've recognized that there's this huge disparity in wealth, and this isn't income, because a lot of the super wealthy, if you look at, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and so on, they have a lot of their money is not from income. They get it from unrealized capital gains. So I think that's something that hasn't been discussed at the UNFCCC as yet, because they're mostly discussing things on what countries have to do. But this is something that they can consider, and how can they support, how could taxation of the super rich, not taxation on the whole, how of a specific group can support meeting climate finance targets and commitments. So it's a new topic of discussion. A lot of advocacy and research is going on into it, but I think it's something that we should start considering as well here in the region, start looking at it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sasha, and thanks, Colin, for the question. Thank you, Malini, for that responding as well. It's been a very wide-ranging double panel, with the first part focusing on sort of philanthropy and the region, and then the second bit looking at data and climate finance. But we wanted to finish off handing it over to Erica Miller, who is going to speak just very briefly a call for action on the Philanthropy for Climate. Go ahead, Eric.
I will be brief with my call to action, but I think all of the conversations today have been setting the stage for, a strong reason for the sector to act. Here we go. So, as we're here because Phil and the local philanthropy ecosystem can leverage Philanthropy for Climate, this movement, this initiative, to coordinate climate philanthropy at the regional level that consolidates the diversity of the sector. We know that in order to meet the scale and complexity of the crisis, our approach needs to be locally led, but globally collaborative. The climate crisis transcends borders, and so our approach needs to as well. In this sense, Phil is committed to strengthening the region's climate philanthropy ecosystem, bringing together local and regional efforts and connecting them to the global. If you want to continue being part of this community and this conversation, please let them know. We are going to collaborate on another workshop with Phil around Philanthropy for Climate and connecting the Caribbean leadership to the global movement. I encourage you and welcome you to share your stories on Caribbean leadership. Through Philanthropy for Climate, we have the case studies. We're constantly convening a community together. If you want to be a part of that community and share your story, please get in touch with us at Wings or Phil directly. You can join the movement by signing the international commitments, so committing to act and learning and growing with the global community. And Philanthropy for Climate will be at COP29 this year, so please connect with us while we're on the ground. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Erica, and thanks again for all the panelists today from Wings, Malini, Sasha, Rosemary. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to hand back to Anthea, who perhaps can respond to a question raised by Mali Kwabina in the chat, which is about where this conversation is going in terms of private sector and philanthropic philosophy in the region, and what Phil's role will be moving forward in facilitating that. Thanks, Anthea.
Thank you. We thank you all for sharing your presentations this morning. Again, quite exciting, because I think we are at the cusp of something great in terms of thinking through how we can maximize the resources and the capacities that exist within the Caribbean. Heard throughout the entire presentations that a lot is happening on the ground in the Caribbean. We have a lot of lessons to share amongst each other, but also to share with the world. And in terms of Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance, it's about capturing the opportunities, but also capturing the stories collectively so we can share it globally. In terms of Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance and climate philanthropy, we are committed to participate in the regional discussions around climate philanthropy, but also to work with you locally to collect the information so that we can make sure that we have a resonant, strong language, but also actions that we can share to talk about how to access resources. We have created an initiative called CLASP, which stands for Climate Philanthropy and Strategic Partnerships. And really what that's about is about holding hands together collectively to formalize how we actually mobilize Caribbean climate philanthropy on the ground. And so the long answer is yes, we'll be working with you. Philanthropy Week is really a platform for discussion to then take it to the next level, to bring specific steps and concrete steps and how we move forward for the year. Just want to say thank you to the team, Maria from Wings. You heard that it's a global network, 220 grant makers influencing philanthropy and global philanthropy in the world. Caribbean Philanthropic Alliance is part of that network. And so our job is to make sure that your voices are heard within that space. And to do that is that we have to work together on the ground in our collective country, in our independent countries and collectively. And so we'll be doing that with you. In terms of Erica, she shared the Inter-American Foundation, Cecilia, she said specifically around, the importance of self-reliance and channeling grants to the communities. Again, in order to do that, we have to have connections on the ground. And so what you have seen in our program, if you've reviewed our Philanthropy in Action Week, is that our representations is grassroots as well. But most importantly, it is diverse and representative of the communities that need to participate in thinking through what that self-reliance looks like in terms of making sure that we roll out a climate philanthropy agenda. Thank you so much, Maria, also for sharing the work within Haiti in terms of what you're doing, in terms of your commitment to ecosystems and national building. We heard you loud and clear around human rights is connected to all what we're talking about, and that we can't divorce the conversation. We can't separate them into silos when we talk about climate justice, climate adaptation, mitigation without talking about human rights for communities, and that they need to lead the interventions and strategies that impact them. And we will be sharing your recommendations with our group. Of course, the whole concept around debt forgiveness is a big issue across the Caribbean, something that we cannot avoid or a discussion around. And so what that would mean is that we need to bring everyone around the table. You heard this morning that we need to be at the table with our governments to talk more specifically about how that impacts our work on the ground. And so we will be spending time with you and with others to think through how do we sit at the table and what do we share when we are there representing you. Thank you, Sasha, for talking about the importance of Los Angeles. I think that's how you started. You talked about the importance of it and helped us to sort of define what that looks like. We recognize there's no real description or around what loss and damage is, but we know how it impacts the spaces that we're in, and what the role of loss and damage can do in terms of we can figure out how to access financing to support those different areas. I think in terms of climate analytics, we'll be working with you more. And thank you for the history lesson on loss and damage. I think that was very excellent. But most importantly, in terms of the entry points for loss and damage, when you made the recommendations around reporting tools, we need to spend some time with you thinking through what type of reporting mechanisms we need to put in place, and how we can build the capacity on the ground for reporting to make a difference, and when we are trying to make the case around accessing climate finance dollars. And of course, Malini, thank you so much again for sharing your definitions around climate finance. And so we will end today's session, I think, more informed and more knowledgeable, which will take us to our next session tomorrow. Tomorrow's sessions will focus on philanthropy meets crisis, climate crisis, and also philanthropy meets creativity. These are two important sessions. The first session, you will hear from our funders and from organizations from the private sector. So the answer to part of the question that you requested this morning around the role of private sector, we will have private sector representation tomorrow from our financial and banking sector, as well as from our insurance sector, who will speak to how they have participated in disaster relief. So you'll hear from them. And also we'll have we will be podiating a funder who is working in the space to promote collaboration among philanthropy to support the arts and culture communities in the Caribbean. And so this has been an exciting time. Thank you so much for joining, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow and for the rest of the week. Thank you, everyone.